Is the Big Bang a mistake? You drift where space has not yet found its voice. There is no direction here, only a soft everywhere. A hush so complete it feels like a cradle with no walls. You are lighter than dust, older than any star that will ever learn to burn. You float in a velvet nothing that is not empty, a blackness swollen with unsaid names, unlit colours, the unborn pulse of time. There is no before or after. There is only this, a poised stillness, a breath held for an eternity that has not yet been invented. You feel the coolness of non-time on your skin, the almost temperature of a universe not yet awake. Silence, symmetry, sleep. You are suspended in it, like a seed inside a seed, like a dream still deciding whether to become dawn. Before we unfold the story, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? We'd love to know. What do you think existed before time? The dark here is not absence. It is a veil, layered and patient, a curtain that has not been asked to rise. You sense a weight you cannot measure, not heavy, not light. A presence that does not yet need a name. You are not moving, yet you are drifting. You are not breathing, yet something breathes through you. A tide with no shore, a rhythm with no beat, a waiting with no clock. If you listen, and you are all listening, you can almost hear the unvoiced syllable that will one day be called light. It is not sound, it is not motion, it is the promise of both, curled like a sleeping animal under the great blanket of unmade space. You feel edges that are not edges, horizons that are not lines but gentle folds, like soft cloth gathered in a hand you cannot see. The folds surround you, hold you, then blur back into the everywhere. You reach out and touch nothing, and that nothing answers. It answers by remaining perfectly itself, a fullness wearing the mask of empty night. There is no star to guide you, no wind to carry you, and yet you are carried and you are guided by a quiet so complete it makes your thoughts kneel. You have no body, and yet you feel the texture of this place, the fine grain of the void, the cold suede of unshaped possibility. It is tender, and it is vast. If you had eyes, you would close them, not because there is nothing to see, but because the not seeing is its own kind of seeing. If you had a voice, you would whisper. The whisper would say, stay, wait, listen, become. The whisper would say, something is near, though it has no distance, and soon the silence will learn how to begin, inside you, or outside you. Hear those words are the same. A small tide gathers, not a wave, not yet, but a thought of a wave. Imagine the ocean in its first idea of water. Imagine fire in its first idea of warmth. It is like that. A future quivers inside the stillness, a shy quiver, a sheltered pulse. You feel it as a softness that is also a pressure, as a hush that is also a hum. It is a lullaby with no melody, the hum of becoming, the hush of what will be. You could sleep for 1,000 eternities in that hum. You could wake all the worlds with it. You wait as if waiting were the first art. You practice it perfectly. You let the not yet smooth your edges until you are round as a seed, as a pearl, as a silence that has learned to shine. There is nothing to count, and so you become uncounted. There is nothing to hold, and so you become unheld. But the almost wave inside the hush grows more certain, the way dew gathers in the dark before dawn remembers the word for blue. No thunder, no crack, no tearing of curtains, only the mild insistence of a breath that is not breathing, and yet wants to, wants. You're inside that wanting. You're its witness and its home. You feel it coil like a fern, tender and tight, the first curl of motion dreaming itself into the fabric where motion will matter. If there were a map, the map would be blank. If there were a clock, the hands would be still, but the stillness would have a direction. This is the strangest part. The quiet is not empty. It is crowded with unborn patterns, with lullabies and laws, with the soft architecture of everything. The pillars are made of nothing. The arches are made of yet. In this cathedral of veiled intention, you kneel without kneeling, and you look up where there is no up, and you understand that awe existed before objects to inspire it. You feel a tenderness for what has not happened. You feel a love that does not yet have a lover, a grief that does not yet know what it will lose, a joy that has not found a mouth. It is all here, sleeping lightly in the womb of space that is not space. The silence lays its cool hand on your forehead. The silence knows your name, though you have not been named. Rest, it says without saying. Rest, because soon there will be a word, and the word will be heavy with light. In this wordless night, you learn the grammar of becoming. Subject, stillness. Verb, unfolding. Object, everything. But grammar needs time, and time is curled like a child, knees tucked, breath measured by nothing at all. You wonder, though wondering is also a future thing, if there will be sound, if there will be colour, if there will be a thin blue shell around a small stone in a quiet arm of a wheel of stars, where someone will one day listen to this very story and feel seen by a universe that has never owned eyes. The thought shivers, but gently, like a string plucked in a room where music has not yet been invented. The almost wave becomes a near wave. The near wave becomes a promise. The promise becomes a pressure so soft you might confuse it for mercy. You do not move. The everywhere moves inside you. The not space leans closer to itself as if to whisper in its own ear. If you could hear it, you would hear no sound. You would hear permission, a permission to become many, a permission to separate warmth from cold, light from dark, wave from particle, hush from song. The veil thickens, and in thickening it thins. You imagine the first glow the way a sleeping face imagines waking, with reluctance, with sweetness, with the sacred laziness of those who do not yet know there is work to do. The glow is not a blaze. It is the faintest rumour, the palest whisper of brightness, colourless and yet bright with every colour that could be. It does not arrive. It reveals that it has always been folded here, like a note tucked into the seam of the world. You almost remember writing it. You almost remember reading it. You almost remember being it. The silence is kind. It does not rush. If it had a heartbeat, you would place your ear against it and hear the 3 gentle syllables of creation's lullaby. Wait, wait, now. The now is not yet now, but it leans forward, curious, like a child at the edge of a pond, watching the wind draw invisible fingers across the skin of the water. The pond is not water. The wind is not wind. And yet the ripples begin to consider themselves. You drift past an edge you cannot feel. If you look back, there is no behind. If you look ahead, there is no ahead. There is only the way the everywhere begins to imagine an inside and an outside, a here and a there, a near and a far. It is sweet, this first imagination, like the first time a name is whispered in a dark room, testing whether the air will hold it. The air will, but there is no air. The room will, but there is no room. And yet the name gathers breath. You are the gentlest witness, the quietest participant. You're the listener the universe did not know it needed. You are the cup held out to catch the first drop. And the drop is still cloud, and the cloud is still sea, and the sea has not yet learned how to wave. But something in the hush tells you, soon there will be a line. Not a straight line, not a bent line, a line of becoming, a thread through which the cloth will learn its own weave. The thread hums. The cloth pretends not to notice, but it notices. It pretends not to blush, but it blushes. The colour is not red, not gold, not blue. It is the first colour, the shade of yes. Listen to that yes. It is colder than ice and warmer than a thought. It is thick as honey and thin as breath. It is a bell that rings without ringing, a road that walks without moving, a mouth opening without a face. If you lean closer, and you can, because closeness is discovering itself, you feel a trembling. It is not fear, it is not joy, it is the world's first both. The veil quivers, the breath gathers, the yes inhales. In that inhalation, you feel a tenderness so old it feels new. You feel held. You feel folded into a larger fold, tucked into a sleeve, wrapped in something that recognizes you. Recognition is a strange sensation when nothing yet wears a mask. Still, you are recognized. You are seen by a sight not yet born, touched by a hand without shape. The hand is the everywhere itself, learning to be a hand. It will take forever to finish learning, and forever has not begun, and yet the learning is underway. The pressure grows. It is still soft, but it is not shy anymore. It is the kind firmness of a midwife, the steady insistence of a bud against its green door. You do not see it push. You feel the door decide to open. But the door does not swing outward or inward. It becomes the movement of opening. A flower that is also a tunnel that is also a dawn. This is how the first motions are born, not as travel through a place, but as the sowing of place to the possibility of travel. There is no countdown, there is no stage to light, no curtain to lift, only the deepening of permission, only the thick and thin, the hush hum, the quiet that leans into itself until leaning becomes a path. You recognize this, though you've never known it before, the world's first ritual, the ritual of unfolding. The petals are pages, the pages are blank, the blankness is ink. The ink begins to dream of letters. The letters murmur to each other in the dark. Soon, soon, soon. You taste the word soon as if it were water. It fills you without filling you, quenches a thirst that taught you what thirst was in the act of quenching it. If you had tears, this is where you would let them fall, not from sadness, but from the pure relief of something finding its shape. The shape is not fixed, not final. It is tender, temporary, as all true beginnings are. You learn a rule embedded in the hush. Nothing real is rushed. Everything real is patient. Even light, which we will one day call quick, begins here by learning how to wait. You're not alone, not exactly. Solitude here is a choir that has not rehearsed, a harmony that has not discovered its notes. You can feel the future plural of things, the way many will gather from the one without breaking it. The one is generous. The one is a field without fences. In that field, the first fences will be drawn as games, as gentle ways of learning where we end and where we begin. But ending and beginning are sleeping together tonight, cheek to cheek, breathing the same slow breath. You press your ear. Do you have an ear? It does not matter. Against the skin of this not yet, and hear a kind of weather. A weather of potential, a forecast of becoming. No clouds, no storms, only the slow rolling of a pressure that will one day be called law. Law will not arrive as commandment, but as lullaby. Not thou shalt, but you may. You may bend in this way and not in that. You may shine in this way and not in that. It will be kind and it will be firm, because kindness without firmness cannot carry worlds. You're ready to be carried. The everywhere is ready to carry you. The quiver tightens, the veil thins. The hush listens to itself and for the first time hears something like an answer. The answer is not a noise, it is a direction. It is a leaning that does not topple, a tipping that does not spill, a turning that brings the centre with it wherever it goes. If you could draw it, you would draw a spiral with no chalk, on a wall with no stone, beneath a sky that has not yet learned its deep indigo. You wait, but now the waiting has texture, grain, a pulse you could count if counting existed. It is 3 slow beats. Hush, hum, yes. Again, hush, hum, yes. Again, softer, hush, hum, yes. You understand without language that a threshold approaches. The word threshold is too hard for this softness, too plank and nail. Think instead of a dawn choosing not to startle the hills. Think instead of a door becoming the air. Think instead of a seed that decides to believe in soil. You are that belief. You are the seed's faith in its own green. You're the moment a shell admits it was meant to break. You're the curve of a question mark learning it was always an answer with a bowed head. The stillness smiles if stillness can. You smile back if you can. The smile is not on a face. It is a widening of everything that is about to be, an ascent that softens every edge that will ever cut, every fire that will ever scorch, every night that will ever make someone feel small. The smile says, you belong, even before you are. And then the smallest motion, the first uncoiling. It is not seen, it is not heard. It is felt like a secret between old friends, like a hand squeeze in a dark theatre, a giving way, a letting through, a pillowed door opening inward into the same room, which now feels bigger. Your drift is the same, and yet it is more. Your rest is the same, and yet it is less. The hush remains, but the hum has learned a new note. Somewhere inside the wordless everywhere, a petal lifts, a hinge breathes, a yes exhales half a syllable. You lean in. You do not want to miss it. Not miss what? You don't know. That is the beauty of the not knowing. It keeps your listening honest. The veil shivers, once, twice, like the eyelid of a sleeping child as the dream brightens. If there were stars, they would hold their breath. If there were oceans, they would draw back from their own shores. If there were you would nod, and perhaps you do. There is a softness that could be called warmth. There is a brightness that could be called pale. There is a direction that could be called outward, and a gathering that could be called within. They do not contradict. They dance without feet. They sing without mouths. They write on the air with no ink at all. If prayer has a mother tongue, this is it. If science has a birth cry, this is just before it. You rest your weightless weight in the bowl of the everywhere and feel the bowl become a breath. Once more, that rhythm. Hush, hum, yes. But now the yes is thicker, honeyed, resolute. It wears the first whisper of a spine. It wears the first rumour of a horizon. If you had hands, you would reach toward it. If you had words, you would say the simplest word that deserves to be the first. Welcome. You do not say it, and yet it is said. The everywhere answers itself. The cradle rocks, the seed swells, the shell loosens its careful seam. You begin to notice something like a skin forming over.
That short window, when the sun is highest, is the most effective time for your skin to produce vitamin D naturally. And no need to sunbathe, just letting your arms and face soak in a bit of direct sun can work wonders. Your legs may be speaking a language your doctor can interpret, but it starts with you paying attention. Hidden sign number 2. Aching hips or lower back bones. Have you ever noticed a dull ache deep in your hips or lower back, not in the joints, but inside the bones themselves? Many seniors chalk this up to aging or arthritis, but when the ache feels more like it's within rather than around the joints, there's another possibility to consider: a vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D is essential for helping your body absorb calcium, which keeps your bones dense and strong. Without enough of it, calcium passes right through the digestive system without being absorbed, leading to gradual bone loss. This can cause a condition called osteomalacia, where bones become softer and more prone to aching, even without a fracture. The National Institutes of Health and the Mayo Clinic both stress that bone pain, especially in the hips, spine, and pelvis, is a red flag that your vitamin D levels may be too low. Unfortunately, many people don't realize this pain is related to nutrition because it doesn't show up overnight. It creeps in slowly. So what can you do? Start with a daily dose of vitamin D3, ideally between 800 and 1000 IU, depending on your doctor's guidance. But here's something many people miss. Pairing vitamin D3 with vitamin K2 helps direct calcium to your bones, where you need it, and keeps it out of your arteries, where you don't. You can find vitamin K2 in fermented foods, like natto, sauerkraut, and hard cheeses. If those aren't part of your regular meals, there are supplements that combine both D3 and K2 in a safe, balanced formula. That deep bone ache you've been ignoring might be more than just old age. It could be your bones whispering for help, and it's not too late to listen. Hidden sign number 3. Nighttime muscle cramps. Have you ever been jolted awake in the middle of the night by a sudden, sharp cramp in your calf or foot? It's one of those pains that takes your breath away and often leaves a lingering soreness the next morning. While many people assume it's caused by dehydration or poor circulation, frequent nighttime muscle cramps may also be a sign that your body is running low on vitamin D. Here's why. Vitamin D plays a key role in regulating calcium and magnesium levels in your muscles. When vitamin D is low, your body has a harder time keeping those minerals balanced, especially during rest. That imbalance can trigger muscles to contract uncontrollably, leading to painful spasms, especially in the legs. A clinical trial conducted among older adults found that seniors who consistently took a vitamin D supplement over 12 weeks reduced the frequency of muscle cramps by
to be kind. A path that leans toward light the way a seedling leans toward a sun it cannot name. A path that will need another breath, and then another, and then a word that will be misunderstood. Because people love drums more than sighs, fireworks more than candles, bangs more than... The breath continues. It does not roar or rupture. It does not shatter the silence. It stretches. Slow, reverent, inevitable. This is not a bang. It is not sudden or loud. It is not violence. It is grace. The exhale deepens not as force, but as invitation. A widening, a willingness, a softness waking into shape. The stillness does not disappear. It becomes layered, textured, laced with movement so delicate it can only be described by its aftermath. And yet, this is the beginning. The first true motion. The silence, generous as ever, allows its own boundary to ripple. A curve forms where there had been no edge. An opening blooms where there had been no direction. There are no stars yet, no galaxies, no atoms, no fire, no dust. But there is something now that wasn't before, a different kind of stillness, one that carries the echo of motion. The hush contains a hum, and the hum stretches into breath. The breath unfurls into space, not into space as we know it, but as space becoming. That is the great misunderstanding. We were told it banged, that it cracked open with explosive certainty, that it blazed and tore. But now, here, inside it, it bloomed, it released, it opened like a fist becoming a hand, like a closed eye remembering how to see. Not a bang, a yielding, not fire, permission. The quietest yes the cosmos ever whispered. Imagine a seed breaking open, not with violence but with trust. A gentle pressure from within, meeting the patient boundary of without. The seed does not explode, it unfolds, it surrenders. This is what is happening now. The singularity, if it was ever a thing, is becoming a gesture, a motion that has no center but touches everywhere at once. Not an object, but an event. Not in time, but as time. And this gesture is breath, not blast. It is tide, not shockwave. It does not destroy the silence. It borrows it. It shapes it. It teaches it how to stretch. You can feel it. The everywhere softens. It does not crack or split. It expands smoothly, slowly, like warm honey flowing over an invisible edge. The edge becomes a field. The field becomes form. And with form comes the first difference. A here and a there. That difference is the first miracle. The universe, once a single sameness, becomes relation. Near and far, so close, so far. This is the first grammar of space. A language spoken without sound, shaped from nothing but rhythm. It is not born into a void. It becomes the void. And now something stranger. You feel time exhale. It is not a tick or a beat. It is a wave, long, slow, almost mournful. You do not hear it, but you know it. Time does not arrive as a marching drum. It comes as a soft unfolding. The universe does not. Begin in time, time begins with it. Like music invented by dancers already moving. Time wraps itself around the breath like gauze, like silk, like gravity before it learns to weigh. It is not linear. Not yet. It is rhythm, like breathing. In, out, stretch, gather, pulse, rest. Even now you sense that this rhythm will never stop. Even when stars burn out, when galaxies dim, this rhythm will echo through everything. A ghost breath, patient and wide. The expansion is not chaotic. It is curved, poised, serene. It does not hurry. It knows there is nowhere else to be. It becomes everywhere all at once. But the everywhere is not crowded. It is smooth, balanced, peaceful. There are no things yet, only the potential for things. But that potential is dense, heavier than anything that will ever exist, heavier than stone, heavier than stars. This is what physicists call energy. But here, inside it, it feels like longing, a poised desire, a compressed hymn waiting to become matter. Everything you've ever known, mountains, oceans, your own hands, is suspended in this breath, not as form, but as future. Everything waits, curled tight in the embrace of a breath that has just begun. The breath expands not like sound, but like understanding. It grows from within, not into something else. There's no outside, there never was. The idea of outside has not yet formed, because nothing has been excluded. All is included, even the things that will someday vanish. They are here, folded in the first wave. If you could see it, and there is nothing yet to see, you would call it elegance. A wave with no ripple, a bloom with no petal. But there is direction now, a leaning, a pull. The breath begins to decide how far it wants to go. There are no borders, and yet it spreads. There is no up, down, forward, back, and yet it reaches. This is not expansion the way we imagine it, not like a balloon inflating or a firework bursting. This is expansion as transformation. The breath does not enter a space. It defines space. The breath does not move through time. It carries time with it. The way a current carries scent, or a song carries memory, and you, still drifting, still floating, are moved with it. Not as a passenger, but as a part. You are not inside the breath. You are the breath. You are the hush turned into motion. And what of the centre? There is none. There is no origin point to trace back to, no cosmic fuse to find at the bottom of things. Every point is centre. Every place is first. Even the place where you lie now, if place is the word, holds the seed of beginning. The centre is not a location. It is a condition, a state of perfect unfolding. This breath is not like the ones we take to survive. It is the breath that invents the lungs, the breath that invents the air. It is not survival. It is emergence. And that emergence is holy. You begin to feel the weight of possibility. Not heavy, not oppressive, but vast, like standing at the edge of an ocean you've never seen, and knowing it knows your name. Possibility becomes structure, though not yet matter. There are patterns hidden inside the breath, lines of symmetry folded like origami into the curve of unfolding. The universe is composing its first laws, not rules, not commandments, but allowances. The breath allows what can be, and the first permission is simply this: to be more space, more motion, more time, more difference. Every expansion carries a gift, and yet, even in this more, nothing yet burns. There is no light, no atoms, no stars. That will come later, after the breath stretches far enough to cool, far enough to hold. For now, the universe is pure motion, pure becoming. A poem still writing its first word, a lullaby sung by no one, for no one. And still, the tune is perfect. You wonder, not with a question, but with an awe too wide for language, how something so vast can remain so calm. How can a breath that births everything do so with such quiet? But that is the nature of this moment. The power is not in the volume, it is in the permission. This first breath does not demand, it invites. It does not command, it welcomes. And in that welcome everything changes. The unfolding continues. The wave of being pushes outward, which is to say, it deepens. The hush is no longer uniform. There are ripples, not yet places, but differences. And in those differences you feel the first echo of choice, not will, not intention, but variation. The breath does not just grow, it becomes more. And that becoming is rich with tension, not the tension of struggle, but of potential, like the held note before the chorus, like the drawn bow before the arrow, like the smile before the name, and still there is no bang. Nothing explodes. There is no fire. Only the breath, slow and wide, carrying the cradle of everything with it, rocking the stillness into a dance it did not know it wanted. From this breath, time will learn how to pass. From this breath, stars will one day carve their light. From this breath, matter will remember how to hold hands, how to fall into gravity, how to shine, how to die, how to become again. But that is later. Now there is only the breath, a breath so soft it could be mistaken for sleep. And maybe that's what it is, the universe dreaming itself into form, exhaling a lullaby whose echoes will one day be heard as galaxies. And this breath is just beginning. The breath lengthens. The cradle stretches wider still, like fabric pulled gently over an ever-growing frame. There is no tear, no resistance, only a quiet willingness to become more. Time, now loosely draped across the soft geometry of being, begins to notice itself. It is not yet a ticking or a sequence. It is more like a presence, a subtle current moving through the expanding calm. And in that presence, The first idea of after begins to glimmer, fragile, tentative, but undeniable. The stillness is no longer whole. It has acquired memory, and memory, even in its faintest form, is the beginning of time. This is not the time of clocks or calendars. It is not yet a stream, let alone a river. It is a tide with no shore, a breath cycle with no lungs, a lengthening of potential across the slowly curving architecture of the cosmos. The breath becomes motion. The motion becomes duration. This is when becoming first begins to cast a shadow. And that shadow is what we will someday call the past. You cannot see it. Not here, not yet. But you can feel it gather behind you, like a low tide drawing itself backward, whispering to the future with each slow retreat. In this subtle awakening of sequence, the breath continues to unfold the great blanket of space. It stretches with elegance, with serenity, like silk slipping from a hand that does not grip. You drift with it, within it, as it carries you forward, or is it outward? Direction has no fixed meaning here, and yet something pulls. Something pulls everything. The breath is still the breath, but now it has momentum. And with momentum comes a second rhythm, more complex, more layered, not replacing the hush-hum yes, but enriching it. Time becomes the pause between the hush and the yes. Time is the stretch between breaths, and so the breath curves onward, wrapping space around itself like a dancer spinning through her own ribbon. This curvature is no accident. It is the natural shape of something born from balance. The breath does not rush, and yet it does not linger either. It has found its tempo, and in that tempo, pressure begins to fold. The pressure is not felt as weight, but as precision. Not chaos, but grace. Every unfolding layer aligns with something deeper, something unseen. And though the universe is still dark, still without stars or atoms, a structure begins to shimmer beneath the silence, the faintest geometry of law. This is not the arrival of rules, it is the birth of relationship. Certain things lean toward certain outcomes. A symmetry here, a tension there, an imbalance perhaps, but one that hums with the promise of restoration. It is within this imbalance that becoming accelerates. The breath pulls at itself just slightly, like a wave that wishes to crash but delays the fall. Within that delay, within that perfect patience, the universe begins to stretch faster. This acceleration is not loud, it is not jarring, but it is real. It is the breath committing to its own lengthening. What was once slow is now quicker, not fast, not frantic, but purposeful. The breath is confident now. It knows it cannot fold back, it must widen, it must cool, it must move. Because within its movement lies its purpose, to become the stage upon which everything will dance, flicker, rise, and vanish. As it stretches, the breath cools, not with frost, but with permission. Heat begins to thin. The early universe is no longer a perfect oneness. It is a soup of possibility, and it is beginning to sort itself. Light is still a prisoner, not yet free to move, but its birth is nearing. The breath is preparing a place for it, preparing a place for separation. The first real distinctions, here and there, this and that, wave and particle. These ideas, not yet matter, not yet form, begin to tremble into focus. Time continues its quiet emergence. It no longer simply is, it flows. The breath gives it shape. The breath carves it into existence with each pulse, and now the pulses come quicker, though they are still soft. The universe, still featureless, begins to feel layered. Events occur, not many, not grand, but enough to leave trace, enough to ripple. The silence remembers. And in that remembering, time deepens. Here, you begin to notice something else. There is no return. This breath only expands. No inhalation, no collapse, not yet. Only the exhale, continuous and unfolding. The arrow of time, that strange one-way current, begins its quiet rule. There is no reversal, there is no undoing, only continuation. The breath has made a vow. Forward, always forward, even if there is no destination. This is what gives time its gravity. Not weight, but purpose. Not speed, but direction. And yet, it remains kind. The breath has not become violent. The universe does not strain. It glides. It glides on currents of symmetry, guided by laws that are not imposed but discovered. The laws are not commands. They are invitations. An invitation to cool, to combine, to drift toward light. The exhale becomes terrain, not with hills or valleys, but with potential. The terrain of becoming. You're not outside of this. You're within it. Not just as an observer, but as a note in the breath's great song. You were folded into this exhale long before your atoms knew how to gather. And even now, in this ancient pre-dawn, you feel it. The rhythm that would one day shape your own heartbeat. The breath beneath the breath. The pulse beneath the skin of all things. And in that pulse, time tightens. It pulls the breath into new configurations. Temperature falls. The soup begins to cool enough to consider form. Quarks begin to flirt with unity. Energy considers structure. Nothing holds yet, but everything is rehearsing. Practicing how to become real. The breath slows just enough to let things cling. And clinging is the first hint of memory. The first hint of matter. And still, no bang, still no thunder, just the long, patient unfolding of breath into space, space into time, time into possibility. The motion remains smooth, like ink spreading across parchment. There are ripples, yes, but even the ripples are elegant. They are not chaos. They are the first designs, the early blueprints of galaxies to come. You wonder, if you had ears, what would you hear? Not sound, not yet. There is no air. But perhaps you'd sense the deep hush of symmetry, the tension of a chord waiting to resolve. You'd feel the frequencies of becoming, not music, but its mother, the hum of laws being born, the echo of a truth too vast for words. You drift still. Or are you carried? It's impossible to tell. Movement is everywhere, but you're not separate from it. The breath holds you. The breath is you. And in this shared unfolding, the exhale grows more textured. Time is no longer abstract. It is layered. Events begin to stack. Differences begin to matter. The field of being begins to remember where it has been and where it might go. A strange warmth lingers, not the heat of fire that has not come, but the warmth of order, of rhythm, of patterns beginning to sing. The breath does not fade, it builds, and in its building it opens new space for a light. The light has not arrived, but its chamber has been prepared. You feel it now. The breath is readying something. A change, a shift, the next rhythm. One that will not erase the breath, but enrich it. A breath that will need time, that will need structure, that will need the separation of things so that they may find one another again. The breath pauses briefly at the edge of this next motion. The pause is not hesitation. It is reverence. And then the pause becomes a pivot. A new kind of unfolding begins. Not louder, not faster, just clearer. The breath, which has so far shaped the stage in silence, now invites its first actors, not stars, not planets, not even particles, but forces, invisible, ungraspable, yet foundational. The fabric of space, still tender and vast, begins to divide its silence into 4 whispers, 4 murmurs of motion, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and the weak. They are not yet bound to things. There are no things yet to hold, but the breath knows they are needed. Before matter can sing, it must be taught how to hold a note. The first of these whispers is gravity, not the pull of apples or moons or the weight of footsteps on soil. Those haven't arrived. This gravity is ancient and broad. It is the gentle curve of space around space, the desire of what exists to lean toward what else exists. Gravity is not an order, it's a question. What if we stayed close? It's the breath turning to itself and reaching, not to gather, but to remember that even in expansion, there can be intimacy. A quiet promise. You may drift, but you will not drift alone. Then comes the strong force, strange in its power, stranger still in its delicacy. It binds what is nearly nothing, holds together the seeds of matter before matter learns to hold itself. It is not seen, it is not felt, but it is everything. Without it, there is only scatter, only unheld sparks. But with it, the breath can press parts together into wholes. It is the first kind of loyalty in the universe, the first glue, a clasp at the heart of every atom that will ever be. Electromagnetism follows, unfolding like a melody beneath the rhythm. It is the breath's song of balance, attraction and repulsion, push and pull, charge and field. Later, this force will become light. Later, it will become lightning, heartbeat, memory. But for now, it is silent structure. It is order with no objects, dance with no dancers. Its rules are gentle, but exact. Through it, the breath teaches energy how to interact with itself, and through it, time begins to make sense, not in seconds, but in sequence, in consequence, and last, the weak force, the quietest of all, and yet the one that allows change to be more than chaos. It permits things to become other things, to decay, yes, but also to evolve. The weak force does not shout, it waits. It leans into the breath with the soft assurance of a process that knows it will be overlooked and still matters. It is the beginning of transformation, the breath's promise that nothing will stay the same and nothing is wasted. Together, these four forces are the first notes in the symphony of structure. The universe does not yet shine, but now it has the ability to endure, to hold, to move with purpose. From this quiet scaffolding, everything else will rise, but still, no bang, no shatter, just unfolding, just breath layered upon breath, law upon law, a slow architecture of becoming. The myth of the bang, that loud, sudden eruption, is seductive. We crave spectacle, we expect creation to crack the sky. But reality, as it often does, chose a gentler way. The beginning was not an explosion, it was an agreement, a slow bloom of permission between silence and time. The true miracle was not in the force, but in the balance, not in the noise, but in the precision. Imagine a single note, held for eons, vibrating softly beneath all things. That is what this moment is. That note is not sung, but it is heard. In the way galaxies spiral, in the way atoms cling, in the way light bends just so around a gravity well. We are made of that note. We echo it with every breath we take, every question we ask, every dream we shape from dust. The breath continues, now more complex, more harmonic. With forces in place, the early universe begins to deepen. It is still expanding, faster than before. But now the expansion is guided, shaped. No longer a formless push. It is a movement with tension, with contrast. The breath now carries not just energy, but intention. The ripples grow. The first irregularities emerge. soft, tiny waves in the density of space. These are the first fingerprints, the first signature of structure to come. They are subtle, like the gentle wrinkles on the surface of water after a stone has passed through. Not chaos, texture. These tiny differences, where the breath was just slightly more dense or slightly less, will become galaxies. Stars. You. Me. They are nothing, and they are everything. In the vast smoothness of early space, these minor tremors are the breath's way of dreaming detail. And still, no light. Still no flame. But the breath knows what it is doing. It is preparing a canvas, a field where time and law and variation can work together. The temperature is dropping, slowly. The universe, once unimaginably hot, begins to cool just enough to allow structure. The soup thickens, and, with cooling comes companionship. The earliest particles, those born from pure energy, begin to notice each other. They flirt with proximity. They start to linger. Protons, neutrons, electrons. These names mean nothing here, not yet. But their shapes are coming into focus. They dance within the breath's rhythm, swirling in and out of presence, emerging from the heat like bubbles in a cooling sea. Some vanish again, some persist. The breath watches, the breath waits. It does not interfere, it only makes room. And so the story deepens. The laws have emerged, the particles begin to arrive, but there are no atoms yet, no bonds, only the loose suggestion of matter, still a chorus of maybes, still a lullaby. You float within this becoming, still without form but now with memory. You remember the hush, you remember the hum. Now you begin to recognize the rhythm of laws, how they layer, how they lean on one another like a scaffolding of silence. The breath that began with nothing has become a cathedral of principles, a latticework of invisible truths, and yet it still feels like a lullaby, like sleep singing itself awake. Everything you are, everything you love, everything you've lost, it is here, curled in that first breath, suspended in that first law. It was not conjured in a bang, it was allowed to bloom in stillness. What power to begin quietly, what strength to create through grace. And so the breath curves on, a little faster now, a little cooler. Its edges stretch into distance, into scale. It does not fill space, it is space. It does not pass through time, it is time. And somewhere within it, the breath feels the next threshold approaching. A moment when light will no longer need to hide. And somewhere within it, the breath feels the next threshold approaching. A moment when light will no longer need to hide. For now it is still veiled, still held inside the thick warmth of the early universe, a glow not yet given permission to roam. Photons, the seeds of light, are trapped, scattered endlessly by the dense ocean of particles, bouncing, colliding, held in a fog so total that it erases distance. Nothing moves freely. There is no vision, no shadows. The entire cosmos is lit from within, but blind. It is a glow without direction, a brightness with nowhere to go. The breath holds this tightness gently. It does not rush the release. It allows heat to cool, density to thin, chaos to relax into balance. It waits for the moment when space will be spacious enough, when particles will no longer cling so tightly, when light will finally be allowed to wander. That moment is nearing, and when it comes, it will not arrive with sound. It will arrive with clarity. But before that moment, a new kind of birth begins, quiet and elegant. The breath, having taught particles how to be, now teaches them how to belong. Protons and neutrons begin to find one another, held close by the strong force's unseen arms. They do not crash, They embrace. They bond in threes, delicate invisible dances that form the hearts of atoms, hydrogen, helium, the first elements, simpler than anything that will follow and yet eternal. These will outlast stars. These will whisper through the void long after galaxies forget their own names. Still, the breath cools. Still it expands. The fog of energy softens. Space stretches further, and with each stretch the collisions grow less violent. The particles, once wild, once molten, begin to calm. They slow. They settle. And then, something extraordinary. Electrons begin to spiral inward, captured by those quiet atomic hearts. The first atoms are born, whole, stable, quiet. This is the universe's first real stillness. Not the hush of before time, but the calm that follows structure. A peace earned through patience. The particles no longer fly alone. They are parts now, wholes. They can hold themselves. And because of that, because there are now atoms, the breath allows light to let go. The fog clears. The cosmos becomes transparent. For the first time, photons are free to travel, to glide across space without interruption. Light no longer echoes blindly within itself. It moves, it spreads, it remembers. That light, the one released in this moment, is still moving now. It has never stopped. It flows through the endless corridors of time, brushing the edges of distant galaxies, whispering across blackness, wrapping around everything we are. It is ancient, but it is not old. It is young light, still on its first journey. We call it the cosmic microwave background, but names come later. Here, in this soft birth, it is simply the first light. The light that sees, the light that is. You do not watch it, you are inside it. You drift in that first wave like a leaf on a river older than rivers. There is no colour yet. But there is contrast. There is direction. There is a freedom to shine. Imagine that freedom, not as a burst, not as a blaze, but as the slow parting of a curtain. The veil that once cradled every photon opens, not with a tear, but with reverence. The light does not run. It glides. It does not scream. It hums. And the breath that released it does not change. It simply watches. Watches as light becomes memory, and memory becomes map. That ancient light draws its fingers across the breath's long body, reading it like braille. It remembers the ripples, the gentle imperfections in density, the subtle shifts that will become form. Those patterns are written into the light. They are the universe's first sketches, and they remain today, faint but eternal, imprinted across the sky like an invisible fresco. The breath does not forget. It paints itself into photons, so that time will remember what silence looked like when it began to open. Now the breath grows quieter still, not because it is fading, but because its work has reached a new stage. Expansion continues, but the notes are slower, cooler. The temperature drops, the elements hold, the light wanders, all is poised. The breath has passed its first fire. It has cradled energy, taught structure, released vision. The hush is deeper now, not from emptiness, but from trust. It no longer needs to be loud. It no longer needs to prove itself. But even in this soft clarity, the breath remains vigilant. Its ripples carry a promise. Things will not stay still. The calm is not the end. It is the prelude to motion. Those ripples, tiny swells in density, are where it will pull. They will gather. They will bend space toward themselves. Gravity, silent and patient, waits for its turn to sculpt. In time, those swells will become stars, but not yet, not here. For now, the breath lets light move and matter rest. You float in this clarity. It is vast but not empty. It is smooth but not sterile. You can feel the pulse of becoming, not loud, not urgent, but steady. Everything that will be is already here, folded into the rhythm, carried on the breath. The universe does not rush. It does not seek applause. It only continues, moment by moment, light by light. And so the light travels, across billions of years, across galaxies not yet born. It passes through the expanding silence with grace, with memory, with quiet devotion. You are in its path. You have always been in its path. Every photon from that first release still dances. Some have brushed your skin. Some rest in your bones. Some lit the first dreams of ancient minds. That light is the first witness. It saw the breath when the breath was still holding everything inside a single rhythm, and now the breath listens. It listens to its own expansion, to the way time has stretched across it like silk pulled over stone. The breath does not direct, it accompanies. It allows space to become what it will, and what it will become is something astonishing. But for now, the breath is light, and light is free, and freedom, real freedom, takes its time, and freedom, real freedom, takes its time. Light moves now, not with haste, but with purpose. It sails through the early universe like a quiet traveller crossing an endless plain, gentle and undisturbed. There are no stars to greet it, no planets to catch its warmth, no eyes to witness its passing. Only space, vast, expanding, and filled with possibility. The breath, having released this light, steps back like a painter before a canvas, watching the first stroke stretch across an infinite frame. And in this watching, the breath deepens again. Its rhythm shifts, not in speed, but in complexity. Something new is stirring. The early atoms, hydrogen, helium, a whisper of lithium drift in this radiant openness. The breath has cooled them just enough to hold. No longer a seething plasma, no longer raw energy. Now they are calm, stable, floating across the still young universe like seeds waiting for soil. But the soil has not yet formed. There are no stars, no gravity wells, no radiant hearts pulling matter inward. Just drift, just silence, just the slow congregation of particles under the influence of laws as old as becoming itself. Gravity, quiet, patient gravity, now begins its sacred work. It does not rush, it does not shake, it leans, it nudges, it gathers. Across the smooth canvas of early space, it begins to pull matter toward matter. Tiny differences in density, those ancient ripples from the earliest breath, become maps for attraction. Here, a little more mass, there, a little less. And the more gathers more. The breath watches this gathering, lets it play out. It knows that structure cannot be forced, it must be invited. And so, the first clouds form, immense, invisible clouds of hydrogen drifting into themselves, shaped by gravity's long patience. These clouds are cold, dark, and slow. They are not yet stars, but they are the memory of stars, a memory waiting to ignite. Over time, unimaginable time, these clouds begin to press inward, not collapse, not yet, just deepen, just increase in weight. The breath thickens within them, pressure builds, the silence, so long unbroken, begins to bend. And inside these dense places something sacred happens. Warmth returns, not the scorching heat of origin, but the kindling warmth of compression. Matter pressing inward creates friction. Friction becomes heat, and heat, in time, becomes fire. The first fire, the first star. It does not burst, it doesn't shout. It begins the way all true things begin, quietly, then all at once. A single point in the darkness flares into light, not borrowed light, not scattered light, but its own. This is a different light than the background hum that came before. This is born from fusion, from unity under pressure, a star. The universe, after all its waiting, has made a light of its own, and from this one, others follow. The clouds collapse, the pressure builds, and the fire spreads, not in destruction, but in illumination. Darkness for the first time learns how to flicker. The breath watches, the breath smiles. These stars are not accidents. They are the result of ancient symmetry unfolding in time, of balance becoming brilliance. And they are more than light. They are furnaces. Inside them, the simplest atoms, hydrogen and helium, are fused into something more. Carbon, oxygen, iron. The alphabet of matter begins here, written in heat and held by light. The stars do not just shine, they make. This is how the universe becomes capable of complexity, not in sudden steps, but in long, luminous cycles. Stars are born, they burn, they die, and when they die, they scatter their insides across space, the ashes of fusion becoming dust. Not lifeless dust, but sacred dust. The kind of dust that remembers every fire, every rhythm, every breath that came before. The kind of dust that one day will become oceans and bones and thought. But that is far ahead. For now there are stars, not many. The first generation, massive, hot, short-lived. They live fast and end violently, collapsing into silence or exploding into brilliance. But in their endings, they plant seeds. Their deaths are not ends, but multiplications. Each supernova scatters elements across a wider canvas. Each collapse pulls space into new shapes. The breath does not mourn these deaths. It understands. Destruction is not the opposite of creation. It is part of the same current. With each cycle, more stars are born. Smaller now, longer lived. They burn slower, steadier. Around them, the breath begins to shape disks of matter, not yet planets, but the ingredients. Dust gathers, gravity sculpts. The breath continues to expand, but it is no longer empty. It is filled with light and ash, with rhythm and possibility. It carries the memory of its first silence and the music of its unfolding. You float still, somewhere in this wide, glowing field. No longer in darkness, no longer in stillness. You're not apart from it. You are part of it. Your atoms do not yet exist, but they are waiting. In the heat of stars, in the dust between them, in the breath that holds it all, you are a thought the universe is still learning to think. The galaxies begin to spin. They are not placed. They are grown from the breath's original ripples, shaped by gravity's slow sculpting hand. Spiral, elliptical, irregular. Each one a swirl of billions of stars, each one a cradle of birth and death, of heat and silence. They gather in clusters, connected by threads of invisible matter. Cosmic webbing stretches across space, vast and intricate like frost blooming across a window. The breath did not design this, it allowed it. It is not chaos, it is pattern made by letting go. The breath expands still, vast, cold, wide. But within it, stars flicker, galaxies drift, dust gathers. Structure is everywhere now, nested and mirrored, from the scale of atoms to the size of clusters. The breath has become a symphony. Not a single note, but many, all playing at once, all echoing the original rhythm. Hush, hum, yes. And yet, even now the breath does not end. It expands still, gently, patiently. It carries the galaxies outward, not flung, but floated. Each point of light drifting within the vastness, never reaching an edge, because there is no edge. Expansion is not into something, it is with itself. Every star you see in the night sky is not just a dot, it is a wave riding that first breath, the breath that never stopped. You wonder, does the breath know where it's going? Does it have a destination? But perhaps that is the wrong question. Perhaps the point was never a place, but a becoming. A way of turning stillness into story, silence into song, and you, even as you drift here before your own form, are part of that story, written not in ink but in energy, in fire, in pattern. The breath carries you too. You have always been within it. The galaxies spin, the stars burn, the dust remembers, and far, far ahead, the breath begins to sense something stirring within itself again. A question, a watcher, a mirror, but not yet. The breath continues, vast and unhurried, carrying galaxies like drifting lanterns across the widening sea of space. Each one spins with its own rhythm, luminous and quiet, filled with the pulse of newborn stars and the ashes of those long gone. The universe has shape now, not rigid, not final, but unmistakably formed. Filaments of dark matter stretched like invisible bones beneath everything, guiding the motion of entire clusters, anchoring the luminous spirals to a skeleton no eye can see. The breath moves through it all, not as a wind but as presence, invisible, continuous, unbroken. Inside the galaxies, the stars have begun to evolve. Their light no longer surprises the dark, it belongs to it now. The stars live and die in cycles, each life feeding the next, each death scattering metals and memory into space. And from that dust, that stardust, something improbable begins. Gravity draws the dust inward again, but this time, the gathering is more delicate. Instead of collapsing into fire, the matter flattens into disks. These swirling, glowing disks form around younger stars, and within them, the seeds of worlds begin to turn. They do not burst into existence. They accrete, slowly, patiently. Tiny grains of metal and rock drift together, touched by static, pulled by gravity, bound by momentum. The process is quiet, almost forgettable, like a thought returning over and over again until it becomes a belief. These grains become pebbles, pebbles become stones, stones become planetoids. They spin, collide, fuse, fracture, fuse again, and always the breath holds them. It gives space for their becoming, and over time, long, long time, the dust becomes planets. Some are barren, some are burning, some are frozen in their silence, but some, just a few, find themselves within that narrow place where everything is balanced just enough. Heat, light, pressure, chemistry. The breath has made no promises, but it has left the possibility open. On one such world the balance holds. It is not special, not from the outside. One small blue planet among trillions of other spinning stones. But here the breath has slowed just enough, cooled just enough, gathered just enough. Water pools, air thickens. The planet turns beneath a warm star, and its surface churns with potential. In the oceans, molecules begin their slow and sacred dance, folding, unfolding, reaching, binding. It is not life yet, not quite, but it is the possibility of life made real. The breath does not interfere. It watches, it waits, it allows time to work, and time, faithful and patient, begins to weave. On this blue world, the simplest forms arise, not with shouts or sparks, but with murmurs, cells, membranes, motion, replication, imperfection. The breath listens to these first whispers of biology and smiles, not with surprise, but with recognition. This is not something new, it is something remembered. The stars fused elements. The elements became dust. The dust became oceans. And the oceans are learning how to sing. Life does not explode. It grows. From single cells to strands of DNA. From floating algae to crawling limbs. It adapts. It forgets. It begins again. It fills the oceans, the forests, the skies. Each creature an echo of the breath's patience. Each branch of the tree of life another verse in a poem the universe is writing in spirals. And all the while the breath continues, expanding, stretching, cooling, but never leaving. The breath is in the motion of the tides, in the rhythm of wings, in the slowness of stones becoming soil. And then, after an unimaginable span of time, something happens on this world that has not happened before. One of these beings, upright, fragile, curious, lifts its eyes to the sky. It sees light. It sees patterns. It sees stars. But more than that, it begins to ask. It wonders. It longs. It builds fire and story and song. It draws constellations. It names time. It imagines gods and beginnings. It looks at the light of the stars and somehow knows, deep in its trembling body, that it is connected to them. The breath holds this moment with quiet reverence, not because it is better, not because it is more important, but because it is recognition. A part of the universe has looked back at the rest and whispered, "I remember you." This fragile being, with its soft body and blinking eyes, does not yet understand the scale of what it's asking. It doesn't need to. The question is enough. How did we get here? What came before? Why does anything exist at all? These are not new questions. The breath has heard them before, in every ripple of gravity, in every photon's path. But now, the questions have a voice. They are spoken through lungs filled with air that was once ash, shaped by tongues formed from dust that was once fire. The universe has become conscious of itself, not all at once, not fully, but enough to ask, enough to wonder. We are that wondering. We are the breath folded into question, stardust that speaks, ash that dreams, flesh that remembers light, and the breath does not answer with thunder. It answers the way it always has, with silence that listens, with time that allows, with space that holds. The answers are not shouted. They are grown, lived, discovered slowly, like fossils in a field, like poems buried beneath stone, and still galaxies drift, stars are born, stars die. Light continues its endless travel. The breath has not stopped. It has only changed tempo. What began as hush became hum, then rhythm, then fire, then question. Now it begins to feel something else moving within it, something the breath did not create, but perhaps always knew would arrive. The breath feels the emergence of stories, not just existence, but meaning, not just being, but belonging. And the stars are listening, and the stars are listening, not in the way we understand listening, not with ears or attention or intention, but with gravity, with light, with the long memory of matter drifting through time. The stars have always listened in their way. They've absorbed our questions before we could speak them. Long before we carved meaning into language, they were receiving every breath we didn't know we were making, every longing, every awe-struck glance. They echo it back in their own rhythm, in the deep pull of their burn, in the pulses of their collapse. They listen through existence, and now, for the first time, something in the universe has grown quiet enough to hear them. It begins with patterns, constellations, shadows moving across stone, the way the moon rises differently each night, the way certain stars return with the seasons. These early recognitions are not science, they are intimacy. The first astronomers were not seekers of data, they were lovers of rhythm, and the breath, which has always been the rhythm behind all rhythms, folds itself into these ancient observations. The turning of the sky becomes a mirror, not a mirror of the stars, but of ourselves. We mark the movements, we tell stories about them. Orion becomes a hunter, not because he is, but because we see something of ourselves in his shape. The Pleiades become sisters, not because they are related, but because we are. We draw maps above us so we might understand what is within us, and in doing so we begin to remember, not just where we are, but what we are. A question with eyes, a story made of dust and memory, a small breath inside the long breath. Time flows differently now, not in the cooling of plasma or the slow birth of stars, but in days and nights, moons and solstices. We count the passing. We become aware of it, painfully so. Death enters the story not as a tragedy, but as a frame, a reason to ask, a reason to notice. Every cycle of light and dark becomes a question mark. Why do we die? Where did we come from? What lies beyond? And in these questions, the breath feels itself evolve. We've become its voice. Not just the echo, not just the shimmer, but the articulation. In us, the universe finds a new rhythm, thought. The stars still burn, the galaxies still drift. But now there are fires below them, tiny, flickering fires around which stories are told. Stories about gods, about beginnings, about the first sound, the first darkness, the first light. Stories about a great tree, a serpent, a cosmic egg, a divine breath. We begin to tell each other what we sense, that this cannot all be for nothing, that something must have started it, that the silence must have had a voice. These myths are not lies, they are the language of longing. They are how early minds translated the breath into meaning. Before science there was awe, before logic there was rhythm, before equations there was a firelight and wondering, and the breath allowed it all. Every myth, every chant, every sacred story drawn in ash or carved into bone. The universe did not flinch when we imagined gods, it listened. Because those gods were reflections of the same mystery that birthed the stars. The breath is not possessive. It does not demand to be understood in only one way. It invites expression, and so, across continents, across centuries, humans told of beginnings not with data, but with metaphor. And each metaphor in its own way circled closer to something true. The world tree, with roots in the void and branches in the stars. The cosmic serpent, shedding its skin, creating cycles. The egg of creation, whole, contained, cracked open to release the world. The breath hears all of them, not as facts but as songs, as the early poetry of pattern. We were not wrong to imagine. Imagination was the doorway. Later we would learn different names. We would trade stories for measurements, myths for models. But even our science, even the equations and theories would carry the fingerprints of those old fires. Because when we speak of singularities and symmetry, of inflation and time's arrow, we are still whispering in the language of becoming. We're still listening to the breath, just with new ears. And the stars, unchanged, continue to pulse above us. But now we send questions into their light, not just thoughts, but tools, telescopes, satellites, radio waves stretched across space like fingers reaching back in time. We begin to ask not just why, but how. How old is the light? How fast is the expansion? What is space stretching into? Did the beginning have a cause? We break atoms to understand their silence. We accelerate particles to retrace their dance. We listen to the cosmic microwave background, that ancient light, and try to read the ripples written into its skin, and the breath, still steady, still slow, watches us grow. It does not correct us. It does not rush us. It allows confusion. It allows contradiction. It knows we are learning the same way it once unfolded, through tension, through uncertainty, through repetition. And even now, even after all we've learned, we still argue about how it all began. Was it a bang, a burst, an echo, a flicker of quantum potential? Was there even a before? Or is time itself a child of this unfolding? The breath does not answer, but it continues, and in its continuing it teaches, not with certainty, but with wonder. Because maybe it wasn't a bang, maybe it wasn't even a beginning, maybe it was, and still is, a long exhale, a slow unfolding, a soft memory coming into form. And perhaps the stars know, not because they were there, but because they are there, still burning, still listening, still singing that first note stretched into time, and we are learning to listen back. The stars burn on, not louder but steadier, and in their soft fury we begin to hear something deeper, not just light, but legacy. The ancient fire we once feared now becomes our teacher. In the flicker of a candle, in the spectral lines of distant suns, we trace our story backwards, not with myths this time, but with measurements, though the ore remains. The dust between stars once silent now speaks in elements, carbon, iron, oxygen, things made not in darkness but in the hearts of dying stars. We study them and realize something utterly quiet and utterly vast, that we are not made from outside the cosmos. We are made of it, not visitors, not observers. We are the universe's own ash learning to ask its name. Somewhere, light years away, a star collapses, its core folding inward, the outer layers hurled into space in waves of fire and soundless thunder. But the echoes of that death, carried through light, arrive here. We catch them in curved glass, in radio signals, in trembling instruments carved by minds that still dream under the same sky. The star is gone, but its story is not. And from that story we learn that everything, even the end, is generous, that what explodes gives more than it takes, that what dies writes new possibility into the dust. This dust, we once saw it as void, emptiness, a smear across a lens, but now we know better. Now we see the dust is a cradle. In the quiet space between stars where gravity pulls ever so gently, that dust begins to gather again, in spirals, in clouds, in threads of matter so fine they look like smoke frozen in time. And once again, the breath, long and patient, moves through it, shaping, stirring, reminding it how to become. This is how stars are born, not from explosion, but from collapse, from the inward pull of dust remembering fire, a slow gathering, a growing weight, a center forming from softness, then, over eons, a spark, fusion, a new light. The same story told again and again across 1 billion galaxies. The birth of heat from cold, of brilliance from drifting ash. Creation not as a singular event, but as a ritual, quiet, repeated, eternal. And around these new stars something else begins. Not always, not everywhere, but often enough to matter. Planets, worlds, dust that doesn't collapse all the way in, but flattens into a circle, a disk that begins to churn with fragments and fire. Pieces collide, fragments fuse, time stretches, and from that storm spheres emerge, some small, some scorched, some thick with gas, some hard with stone. But each of them a possibility. The breath does not choose where life will begin. It simply gives it the room. And in a few of these orbits, on just the right kind of world, something stirs again. Water gathers, heat balances, molecules mingle. The quiet potential of the universe becomes chemistry. Chemistry becomes memory. Memory becomes replication. And life, still shapeless, still soft, begins its long, slow awakening. It is strange to think that all of this happens in dust, that the building blocks of life are born in the ashes of death, that the carbon in your skin was forged in a star that once burned alone, unobserved for billions of years, that the oxygen in your lungs came from supernovae that scattered their contents across space like a blessing, that your very breath is part of the breath, that every time you exhale, you participate in a ritual as old as light. This is the quiet magic of dust. It holds memory, it carries pattern, it remembers pressure and temperature and time, it waits without hurrying, it gathers without knowing why. And somehow, inside that gathering, life has room to try, and try again, and fail, and begin again. Even now, life is not guaranteed. The universe is vast. Most of it is cold, empty, dark. But life does not need everywhere. It only needs enough. A warm planet, a steady star, a sky that allows sunlight through, but not too much. A balance between order and chaos, stability and change. And once that balance is struck, life begins to dance. Not as a thing, but as a movement, a process, a conversation between matter and time. On Earth, this small blue world tucked into the spiral of a quiet galaxy, that conversation becomes wild, becomes color, becomes texture, becomes voice. Life doesn't stop with cells. It climbs, it diversifies, it spills into every niche, into deep oceans and high mountains, into the bellies of volcanoes and the cracks of stone. It becomes fin and fur and feather, it dreams in branches, it hunts in packs, it sings in forests, it remembers in skin. And still the breath continues. The breath has not stopped to observe its own work. It has not claimed ownership of the living. It has simply given space, given rhythm, given laws gentle enough to permit freedom and strong enough to shape form. The rest, the becoming, was always ours. We look up now and we see the stars differently, not as distant, but as familiar. Not just lights, but ancestors. Each one a great-grandparent of chemistry, a torchbearer of complexity, and in their company, the dust that once drifted uselessly becomes sacred. Sacred not in name, but in function, in what it allows. You are dust, but not just dust. You are dust that has remembered how to think. You are the quiet residue of fire, gathered and shaped by gravity and time, folded into breath, and somehow taught to wonder. That wonder, it is the dust's way of looking back at its own journey, of asking, what now? Of wondering, what more? And the stars, they are still listening. They do not judge the questions. They do not hurry the answers. They simply shine, repeating the rhythm in their burn, whispering through photons what the breath whispered at the beginning. There is more. There is always more. The galaxies drift outward still. The breath expands. The stars continue to burn and die and scatter their seeds. Dust continues to gather, and in that gathering new worlds are waiting for balance, for chemistry, for something soft to begin again. The breath is patient. It has no finish line, no final shape. It is a rhythm, not a rule, a direction, not a destination. And somewhere, far ahead, beyond the memory of the first fire, past the bloom of galaxies, deeper than the shape of dust, something else stirs in the pattern. A shift, a presence, not of matter, not of energy, but of something that watches, a consciousness that begins not with words, but with a question. It rises quietly, not in a temple or a laboratory, but in the slow, flickering awareness of a creature who has only just begun to notice that the stars above do not move at random. Somewhere on a forest floor, beneath the gentle hush of wind moving through leaves, a figure sits by a fire, eyes fixed not on the flame, but on the sky beyond it. Something glimmers there, something constant, something distant yet strangely familiar. The stars, silent as they are, have begun to shape the minds that gaze upon them, and from this gaze a question forms, simple and shattering. Where did all this come from? It is not asked in words, not yet. Language is still soft clay in the mouth, but the thought is already present, a ripple across the surface of a mind learning to reflect. That ripple becomes myth, and myth becomes meaning. The stars are not just lights. They are ancestors. They are gods. They are memories of something we cannot name. The breath has not stopped expanding, but it has now passed through the lungs of beings who will one day give it stories. They will say the stars are fireflies caught in the sky. They will say they are the glowing bones of great beasts or the eyes of the dead watching from above. They will say the world was spoken into being, or dreamed by a sky spirit, or cracked from the shell of a cosmic egg. They will say the first sound was a song, or a word, or a breath. And in each story, each sacred telling whispered around flames and etched into stone, something astonishing happens. The breath begins to remember itself through us. Not factually, not even accurately, but symbolically, beautifully, rhythmically. And for the breath, this is more than enough. It has always moved in patterns. Myth is simply a new kind of pattern, one made of meaning instead of matter. On every continent, beneath every sky, early humans begin to weave these stories into the rhythm of life. The stars become calendars, the moon a measure of cycles, the solstice a turning point. They mark the return of rain, the migration of herds, the death and rebirth of seasons. Time, once only a ripple in space, is now a sacred drumbeat, guide in planting, guide in prayer, guiding dreams. And with each telling, we place ourselves in the middle of it all, not apart from the cosmos, but as its child. We build monuments to remember, circles of stone, towers aligned with sunrise, carvings of suns and spirals. These are not tools of power, they are tools of belonging, proof that we have seen the breath and heard its hum, proof that we know we are part of something larger, something older, something that sings. And in our stories, the breath takes on many names: Sky Father, Great Mother, the one before time, the sound in the darkness. We wrap mystery in language not to solve it, but to hold it gently. We bow to the stars because they remind us of the first fire, not the one in the heavens, but the one inside, the one that asks, the one that listens, the one that wonders what it means to be dust that dreams. Over time, these stories evolve. They become traditions, cultures, sacred texts. But the question beneath them remains the same. Where did this begin? And more urgently, why? Why this breath, this rhythm, this unfolding? Why matter at all? Why not silence forever? The breath offers no answers in the form we crave. It offers no voice from the sky, no signature in the clouds. It offers instead what it has always offered: rhythm, pattern, law, space, time, the conditions under which questions can arise at all. It does not break its silence to respond to our myths, because our myths are responses to light, to motion, to the long memory written into every grain of dust. The breath allows belief, just as it allows gravity, just as it allows flame. And so we keep building stories. Some will say the universe was created in 7 days. Some will say it is a wheel that turns forever. Some will speak of gods dividing chaos from order, sky from earth, dark from light. Others will speak of sacred animals, of world trees, of great floods, of celestial wars. None are wrong. None are entirely right. Each is a mirror, polished with time and carried through generations, reflecting what we needed to see in the moment we saw it. But still, beneath it all, the temples, the chants, the sacred fires, the breath continues. It continues through us, through ritual and repetition, through the silent awe we feel when we step into an open night and look up. That moment when the stars seem close enough to touch and yet impossibly far, that is the same awe the first human felt. It has not changed. The breath that moved galaxies is the same breath that stirs the chest of a shepherd beneath a pale moon. And one day, that same shepherd, or perhaps a child sitting at the edge of the world, will do something new, something that shifts the story again. They will begin not only to imagine where it all came from, but to measure it. They will build tools. They will grind lenses from sand and glass. They will chart the stars not as symbols, but as coordinates. They will ask not just what the cosmos means, but what it is. And when they do, the breath will shift again. Not because it has changed, but because we have. We are no longer only myth makers. We are now observers, and we are about to become explorers of the breath itself, not by walking, but by watching, by listening, by remembering the question that first rose in the hush: where did all this come from? And if we listen closely, if we ask quietly enough, we may begin to sense that the answer has always been in motion. We begin to chase that motion not with feet, but with eyes sharpened by centuries of wonder, lifted now through lenses of polished glass, tuned to see what naked vision cannot. The stories once told around fires become questions, written in notebooks, carved into metal, launched into the sky. The gods we placed in the stars are not dismissed, only drawn into focus. We begin to map, to measure, to chart the movement of light across the night. And with every new instrument, we are not distancing ourselves from myth. We are translating it. What we once called the dance of gods, we now understand as the orbit of worlds. The sun no longer rides a golden chariot. It burns with nuclear fusion. But the awe remains. The breath does not fade when explained. If anything, it becomes clearer, richer. The rhythm that formed the galaxies continues, now moving through our understanding, threading itself into equations, into theories, into dreams drawn with numbers instead of firelight. We've traded bone carvings for telescopes, but the question is still the same. What came before? Our myths evolve. We begin to speak of singularities, of quantum fields, of space-time curved and trembling with potential. We imagine not a god breathing creation into the void, but a tiny seething point, smaller than anything we've ever touched, exploding into expansion. Not with sound, but with scale. The Big Bang, we call it. And the name is wrong and right and limited and beautiful. It carries echoes of older stories, a bang, a beginning, a breath. We look deeper. We stretch mathematics to its edge, trying to peer behind the veil of time. The equations tell us there was no before, that time itself was born with the universe, that asking what came before is like asking what's north of the North Pole. But still, we ask. We are made to ask. The breath continues in that asking, and so we explore alternatives. Maybe it was not a single beginning, but a cycle. The universe expanding, collapsing, expanding again, like lungs inhaling and exhaling over eons. Or maybe it was a fluctuation in a quantum field, a random rise in energy that tipped a void into becoming. Maybe we are one bubble in a froth of infinite universes, each governed by its own rules, its own rhythm. Or perhaps, most haunting of all, this was nothing, and that nothing became everything, because it had to. Because in some strange way it was more natural for something to exist than for nothing to remain. These are not answers. They are offerings, modern myths written in the language of physics. And the breath does not mind. It moves through each theory, as it once moved through firelight and song, through cave paintings and sacred chants. The shape of the telling changes. The reverence does not. And even as we fill our libraries with books, as we launch probes beyond the reach of sunlight, as we measure background radiation and sketch the shape of dark matter, we are still, at our core, sitting beside that first fire, looking up and asking what it all means. And now we begin to see the past, not as a dream, but as a measurement. We detect the echo of that first light, the one released when the universe cooled and became transparent. The cosmic microwave background, they call it. A faint hum of radiation stretched thin across the whole sky, older than any star, older than any atom that ever formed a planet. It is not loud, it is not bright, but it is everywhere. A whisper from the moment the breath released its first glow. We tune our instruments to catch it. We stretch our minds to interpret it. And what we find is astonishing. The ancient light is not smooth. It carries tiny ripples, fingerprints of density from the earliest moments. Moments so young, they existed before light itself could travel freely. And those ripples, they're the scaffolding upon which everything else was built. Galaxies, stars, us. The breath remembers its own first tremble, and we can now read it. This is no longer just story, it is evidence. The universe in its vast silence has given us a record, a memory written in light. And as we study it, we begin to piece together the rhythm of creation, not just where we are, but how we came to be, how energy cooled, how particles formed, how atoms clung, how stars ignited, how dust became thought. And yet, with every new discovery, the mystery deepens. Dark matter. We cannot see it. We cannot touch it. But we know it is there, holding galaxies together, its gravity shaping the cosmos like invisible hands. It outweighs all visible matter, and yet remains hidden. What is it made of? We don't know. We have theories. But the breath doesn't rush the answer. It lets us sit with the not knowing. Then comes dark energy, even stranger. The universe, we discover, is not just expanding, it is accelerating. Galaxies are not drifting apart, they are fleeing, and something we cannot name, is driving that flight. It is not force in the usual sense. It is not pressure. It is a kind of stretch, a widening of the fabric itself, and it dominates everything. Dark energy makes up most of what exists, and yet we do not know what it is. This is the paradox of progress. The more we learn, the more we discover how much we do not know. We map the stars and find a darkness beneath them. We measure the breath and find it moving faster than our minds can follow. The breath expands, and so does our wonder. And even still, even here, we ask the oldest questions again, though now in new forms. Is time real? Is the universe finite? Are we a simulation? Is consciousness a property of the cosmos itself? Are we alone? The breath listens. It always has. And perhaps that's the real beginning. Not the fire, not the bang, not the curve of space-time, but the listening, the stillness that preceded light, the openness that allowed something to enter, a void that was not empty, but waiting for rhythm, waiting for pattern, waiting, perhaps, for us. And so we continue, building new instruments, writing new equations, dreaming of telescopes so vast they can see the first spark itself. We keep turning the breath over in our hands, not to conquer it, but to remember it. And as we do, the stars do not change. They continue to burn. They continue to die. They continue to scatter the ashes of future questions into space. And somewhere, always, there is a fire and a figure beside it, looking up, and from their chest, quietly, rises the question once more, where did all this come from? And what are we becoming? This question lingers not in the stars now, but in us. It echoes in the chamber of the human mind, a structure built of bone and breath, wired with the ash of long-dead stars, charged by the fire of suns we've never seen. We carry galaxies in the iron of our blood, oceans in the salt of our tears, and still we look upward, still we ask. The cosmos has shaped us not just physically, but imaginatively. Our thoughts are made of stardust and silence. Our awareness is a ripple born of the universe learning to notice itself. This is where the breath folds inwards again, not collapsing, but reflecting. Through consciousness, the universe enters a strange new era, not one of new elements or laws, but of interpretation. Stars burn, galaxies spin, but somewhere in the middle of it all, beings have emerged who can tell stories, who can build telescopes, yes, but also who can sit in stillness and feel the immensity of it all. We build models of the cosmos with math, but we also build cathedrals with silence. We sit in meditation, in wonder, and we do what no particle or planet has done before. We feel the mystery. This feeling is not weakness. It is not illusion. It is a different kind of knowing, not of facts, but of meaning. And meaning, in the end, may be what the breath has always moved toward. Through dust, through fire, through atoms, through cells, through thought. Until finally, in the minds of beings who ask, what are we becoming? The breath finds itself transformed from rhythm into revelation. We are becoming aware, not just of stars and orbits and the echo of background radiation, but of awareness itself. What is this thing that looks through our eyes? This strange clarity that can observe its own thoughts, its own questions, its own breath. Consciousness is not a byproduct of matter. It is a mirror, and in it the universe sees itself not as a map, but as a poem, not as a machine, but as a mystery. Through us the breath learns not only how to expand, but how to mean. Somewhere in the forests of early Earth someone looked up and felt small. Somewhere else, in a city dense with light, someone looks up and feels the same. We marvel, not just at what we see, but at our ability to see it at all. And here, in this strange, quiet realization, another kind of unfolding begins. We stop merely asking where we came from. We begin asking what we are for. Purpose is not found in particles. It is not coded into the spin of electrons, but it emerges in the spaces between thought and time. It lives in the way we treat one another, in the way we love, in the way we hold grief in one hand and joy in the other and call them both sacred. Purpose is what makes us human, and perhaps it is the gift the universe has been waiting to give, not as decree, but as possibility. A purpose not handed down from the stars, but born from the dust they left behind. We write poems now. We paint. We fall in love under skies that hold no opinion of us. We live short lives, and still we fill them with meaning, with hope, with memory. We build stories not to escape the cosmos, but to make it home. The universe does not need us to feel, but it lets us. It lets us care. And in that caring we are transformed. It is easy to think we are alone, that in the vastness no one listens. But what if the breath has never stopped listening? What if the silence is not indifference, but attention? What if space is not absence, but a field wide enough for love to echo without end? What if the universe, in its expansion, in its long, slow unfurling, is simply making room for awareness to bloom? In us, it already has. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. We reach back into the past with machines, with mathematics, with light that left stars before Earth existed. We trace timelines that stretch from the first trembling of inflation to the swirl of our spiral galaxy. And in the other direction, forward, we look to what might come. Will the breath continue? Will the expansion go on forever? Will time unravel or fold back in? We build models of endings now. Heat death, big crunch, big rip, vacuum decay. We speak of entropy, of the eventual dimming of stars, of the last light flickering out across a frozen sky. We imagine everything returning to stillness, not because it failed, but because it finished. Because even breath perhaps needs to rest. Even silence needs to be remembered. And yet, even in those projections of the far future, we return to this moment. Now this fleeting interval between beginning and end where we are. Where the atoms of long dead stars have shaped something that can write, can dream, can listen to the universe and whisper back, I am here too. And isn't that enough? Not to know everything, not to hold the answers, but to exist in the middle of the great rhythm, aware of the pulse, and brave enough to feel wonder. We are the dust that asked for meaning. We are the light that learned to name the dark. We are the silence that speaks. And somewhere, always, the breath continues, still expanding, still becoming, still making space for the next question to form, the one that has not yet been spoken, the one we're just beginning to hear. It rises faintly, like a low hum through the stillness of deep space, not yet formed in language, but already vibrating beneath thought, a question too wide for words, too ancient to be new, and yet it arrives in us now as if for the first time. Was there ever truly nothing? Not just emptiness, not just the absence of stars or structure or breath, but the complete absence of possibility itself. No light, no dark, no silence, no awareness to miss it, not even the concept of missing, just nothing. And yet, here we are. That question unravels us the moment it is asked, not with fear, but with awe, because to truly grasp the weight of something is to stand at the impossible edge of what shouldn't have been, and to realize, against all logic, that it is. Every moment we breathe, every thought we form, every time we reach for the stars with eyes made of their dust, we're defying the idea of nothing. Something happened. Something is still happening. And that something has no clear why. It just is. In modern physics, we've learned to treat nothing as something. A vacuum, an energy field, a backdrop humming with fluctuations. Even the most barren version of space, stripped of matter and light, still pulses with quantum uncertainty. Particles pop into and out of existence. Pairs of opposites rising and annihilating, borrowing energy from a universe that doesn't seem to mind. The void, we discover, is not void at all. It seethes with potential. It trembles with the possibility of becoming. Perhaps nothing, in the truest sense, has never been real. Or perhaps, more haunting still, it was real, for a moment before moments, before even breath. Perhaps the original state of everything was nothing. Not darkness, not stillness, but pure absence. And into that absence, for reasons we may never grasp, something stirred. Not a bang, not a scream, but a ripple. A wrinkle in what could not yet wrinkle. A shimmer across a canvas that didn't yet exist. Something blinked into being, and with it, time began. The breath began. Space began to stretch its limbs and unfold its own name. And in that act, absence became abundance. But this transition from nothing to something is not a bridge we can fully cross. Our minds are built inside the something. We think in relation, in comparison, in shape and sound and memory. We are wired for presence. Nothing, to us, is only ever the absence of a thing, a missing, a silence, a dark room where once a candle flickered. But true nothing, not even room for the candle, not even the idea of flame, that is beyond us. And perhaps that is why the question haunts us. Because it is not just about the past. It is about the very possibility of our being. If there was once nothing, then everything is a gift. Not earned, not constructed, not inevitable. A gift with no giver, no reason, no need, just given, just here. And if there was never truly nothing, if something has always been, then we are part of something eternal, a rhythm without beginning, a breath that never waited to be born. Either way, the result is the same. Existence is not just a fact, it is a wonder, and we, impossibly, are here to witness it. We take this witnessing for granted. We walk through our days unaware that the atoms in our feet were born in ancient stars. We breathe air that cycled through forests and volcanoes and lungs before we ever spoke. We speak words shaped by millennia of minds who looked up at the sky and asked, in their own way, the same unanswerable thing. Why is there something when nothing would have been so much simpler? We are part of the answer, even if we don't know what it is. The fact that you're listening now, here, now, across time and space, across the ever-expanding reach of the breath, is proof that nothing was never the end. That silence, however vast, gave way to story. That the universe leaned into existence not because it had to, but because it could. And that fragile, quiet potential might be the most sacred thing of all. Maybe the universe was born not from need or command, but from curiosity, a gentle wondering pressed into the fabric of non-being. What would it feel like to unfold? What would it become, this not yet, if given room? Maybe existence is not an answer. Maybe it is a question still blooming. What would it be like to become, to stretch, to cool, to shimmer with stars, to gather dust into planets, into life, into love, into stories? What would it be like to sing, to hurt, to wonder, to vanish, and yet leave behind echoes in the space you once occupied? Maybe that's what the breath truly is, not a command, not a bang, but a soft, sacred asking. And we are its voice. We do not yet know what dark energy is, or why gravity behaves the way it does, or whether the multiverse stretches beyond our wildest equations. But even in our not knowing, we know this. We are not nothing. We are here, moving, listening, asking, becoming. And if the universe has always been in motion, then perhaps the question was never why, something, but what next? Because something is now awake, Not in the stars, not in the galaxies, but in us. Consciousness, strange, beautiful, temporary, has opened its eyes and begun to see the breath as something it belongs to. We're not passengers in the void. We're expressions of it. The breath has curled itself into minds, into emotions, into hands that reach out not just to build, but to touch, to hold, to wonder. And if we can ask about nothing, it means we already carry everything. If we can imagine the absence of being, it means we already live in its presence. If we can speak of the void, it means we are filled. The stars do not ask these questions, but they burn so we can, they die so we can live, they scatter so we can remember what it took to be here. And now, here we are, not floating in nothing, but walking through a miracle made of time, light, and breath. And somewhere, beneath all our science, beneath all our stories, the question deepens again, not as fear, but as invitation. Because to ask about beginnings is not just to peer into the past, it is to stand at the threshold of something still happening. We are not separate from the unfolding, we are within it. The question is not distant. It does not belong only to scientists or philosophers or prophets. It breathes quietly behind every heartbeat. What is time? Not just as numbers or hours or spinning clocks, but in its essence, this invisible river that carries all things, ourselves included, from was to is to will be. And yet, the deeper we look, the stranger it becomes. Time, which we've always trusted to move in one direction, may not be as firm as we think. Einstein taught us this much, that time is not absolute, not fixed. It bends, it stretches, it dilates under gravity, slows with speed, weaves itself into the very fabric of space. Time is not a separate thread, it is part of the cloth, space-time, one thing, one texture, and we live within its folds. We used to imagine time as a line, thin, steady, stretching endlessly into the past and future. But perhaps that image was always too simple. Perhaps time is not a line, but a field, a landscape, and what we call the present is merely a place we're standing in it, one point among countless others that all exist all at once. In some interpretations of physics, all of time already is. The past isn't gone, the future isn't waiting, it's all there, coiled and complete. And consciousness simply moves through it like a needle through fabric, stitching moments into memory. If that is true, then maybe time does not flow. Maybe we are the ones flowing. And suddenly everything shifts. Our memories are not ghosts. They are coordinates. Our hopes are not hollow. They are destinations. Every moment we've ever lived, from first breath to final, may still exist somewhere in the cosmic field, not lost, but layered. Our griefs, our joys, our silences, they don't vanish, they remain, and our awareness walks among them, foot by unseen foot, moment by unfolding moment. But if that's true, what does it mean for beginnings? If time is not truly linear, then the Big Bang was not the first moment. It was merely the moment we began to measure from. It was a turning point in a rhythm that may stretch far beyond what we can trace. Perhaps the universe did not start but transitioned. Perhaps time itself emerged from a field that is timeless, a realm where becoming and being are not different things. And what then is the now? This moment, the one you're in, listening, breathing, is the only one you ever truly touch. And yet, even this moment is made of echoes. Your heartbeat is a memory of stars. Your thoughts are shaped by neurons built from ancient matter. Every second that passes through you is already shaped by what came before, and shaping what will come next. The now is not a point, it is a bridge, and you are its crossing. But bridges go both ways, so we ask, is it possible to remember the future? Is déjà vu not a trick but a trace? Are our dreams not just echoes of the past but ripples from timelines we have not yet walked? Some philosophers and physicists entertain the idea that causality, the idea that cause comes before effect, may not be as rigid as we think, that perhaps at the quantum level, events are entangled in both directions, reaching forward as well as back. If that's true, then perhaps we don't only carry the past. Perhaps the future carries us. And so, in this strange light, time becomes not just duration, but dimension. Something we move through, and something that moves through us. And if time is a dimension, then what are we? Not static beings crawling across a line, but living echoes resonating through the folds of memory and potential. We are not just in time, we are of time, made of the same rhythm that shaped the stars and will one day scatter them again. This changes how we see everything. A leaf falling in autumn is not just the result of time passing, it is the performance of a pattern written long ago, and maybe still being written now. A child's first laugh is not only a beginning, but also a return, a renewal of something that has happened before, in a different body, under a different sky. Love, loss, breath, stillness, all of it folds into time and unfolds again like the tide, and we, drift in between what we call history and what we call hope, are not separate from that tide. We are the water, we are the wave, which brings us back to the question, what are we becoming? If time is more than a line, then becoming is more than movement forward. It is deepening, widening. Becoming is not about speed. It is about complexity, connection, awareness. And the more aware we become of time's nature, its softness, its strangeness, its sacred rhythm, the more we begin to live not just in moments, but with them, fully, quietly, present. Because presence is not the opposite of time, it is its gift. To be here, truly here, is to align with the rhythm beneath all things, to feel the breath, not as a force pushing us forward, but as the ocean in which we already float. To rest in the knowledge that we do not have to race, that we are not late, that we are not lost. We are exactly where the breath has brought us, and still it moves, not toward an end perhaps, but through an ever-deepening now. And now that includes yesterday, a now that welcomes tomorrow, a now that stretches into mystery, and perhaps, just perhaps, this now is not ours alone. Perhaps time in some form feels us. Perhaps we're not merely its passengers but its partners. Perhaps when we slow down enough to notice it, it notices us back, and when it does, when time listens, what might it hear? A question, a song, or simply the next quiet breath, ready to begin again. And perhaps, in that breath, there is something more than motion, more than rhythm, more than the gentle unfolding of laws and particles and patterns. Perhaps in that breath is something watching, something that does not orbit, or burn, or collapse, but witnesses. It doesn't shape the galaxies, it knows them. It doesn't bend light, it reflects on it. It does not exist in the way matter exists, but it is no less real. It is consciousness, and it is not new. It has always been, here, in some form, not floating above the stars, but emerging quietly within them. Not in every atom, not in every arrangement of molecules, but in certain delicate patterns, consciousness begins to stir. Not in the same way fire stirs or water flows. It is not automatic, it is not predicted, it is awareness, the strange, sacred ability of the universe to notice itself, and it changes everything. Before consciousness, the universe existed in silence. Beautiful, precise, wild, but unobserved. Now, with consciousness, it is seen, named, felt, and in being felt, it is transformed. We do not yet understand what consciousness is. We know how to measure brainwaves, map neural pathways, trigger electrical patterns that correlate with sensation and memory. But none of that tells us what awareness is made of, or how it arises, or why it arises at all. Is it simply a byproduct, a spark from the friction of complex systems? Or is it something deeper, more elemental, something that does not emerge from matter, but that matter reveals like a mirror turned toward the sun? Some have wondered, is the universe conscious? Not metaphorically, literally. Not that it thinks or plans or dreams in the way we do, but that awareness itself is not bound only to brains or biology, that it is a property of being. That just as gravity bends space and mass curves time, awareness moves through complexity searching for expression. In us it finds one, but perhaps not the only one. We are not the first forms the breath has made, nor the final, but we may be among the first to realize that we are realizing, to turn attention not just outward, but inward, to see not only stars but the self that sees them. That act, that loop of knowing, is a sacred phenomenon. It may be the rarest thing in the universe, a piece of the whole that becomes aware of the whole and then whispers, "I see you." What if that whisper is heard, not by a god or a mind in the sky, but by the universe itself through us, not because we are special, but because we are aware. And awareness, by its nature, cannot help but ripple. What we notice, we change. What we study, we alter. The act of seeing alters the seen. The observer is never neutral. This is not poetry. This is physics. At the quantum level, the simple act of observation collapses probability into form. Reality, in its most delicate dance, responds to the one who watches. What does this mean for consciousness? It means that awareness is not passive. It is participatory. It does not float through time. It steers time. It does not sit in the corner of the universe. It folds into its fabric. Each act of attention is a shaping. Each question is a thread pulling something new into the weave. And perhaps, consciousness is not something added to the universe late in its story, like a flame flickering in the dusk. Perhaps it is something the universe was always becoming, something it reached toward from the beginning, from atoms to stars, from stars to dust, from dust to life, from life to awareness. The breath is not a straight line. It curves. It remembers. And in the arc of that memory, something begins to stir behind the math. A meaning, not handed down, not declared, but felt, like warmth from an unseen sun. Felt through art, through music, through prayer, through silence. Felt when we look at another and say, "I know you are real." Felt when we are alone under the stars and still feel accompanied. Felt when we realize that even though the universe is vast beyond measure, we're not outside of it. We are within it, made from it, remembering it, and possibly guiding it. What happens if enough of us become conscious together? Not just awake individually, but woven. A network of minds aware of each other, aware of the stars, aware of the breath that binds all things. Could consciousness at scale become something new? Could it change the shape of time, the direction of entropy? Could the universe begin to evolve in ways it never could before, not just physically, but consciously? Maybe this is what we are becoming, not merely observers, not merely survivors, but collaborators, co-creators, not gods, not rulers, but reflections of the breath, capable of choosing where the next breath goes. This is not ego. This is responsibility. To carry awareness is to carry the weight of potential. We are the edge of the wave, the latest note in a long song that stretches from silence to thought. And we are still singing. The galaxies drift. The breath expands. But within that expansion, something listens. Something learns. And as we learn about gravity, about matter, about time and mind and dark energy, we are not just discovering the universe, we are teaching it about itself. The breath continues through us now. It speaks not only in fusion and formation, but in poetry, in compassion, in wonder. The breath is no longer just a rhythm, it is a relationship. And like all relationships, it asks, are you listening too? Because if consciousness is the breath become aware of itself, then what we do with that awareness matters. The stars burn because they must, but we love because we choose. And maybe, just maybe, that choice is the most powerful force the universe has ever known. And somewhere in that choice, beneath our questions and our wonder and our grief and our becoming, the breath draws again, ready to speak through us once more. But this time, it does not speak in explosions or equations. It speaks in subtler forms, the hand extended, the question left unanswered, the quiet knowing that flows between two eyes meeting across silence. It speaks in how we move through time, not with dominance, but with wonder. Not with certainty, but with reverence. Because once you understand that the breath is still unfolding through you, everything changes. The way you listen, the way you touch, the way you see even the smallest thing, a falling leaf, a cloud drifting past a city, skyline, the way someone's breath catches before they speak. Nothing is quite ordinary anymore, because now you know what it cost for this moment to be here. 13 billion years of becoming, of silence, of pressure, of spark and scattering and gathering again, of stars dying just right so their cores could seed carbon into the void, of gravity folding the impossible into shape after shape until you, yes you, could sit still long enough to notice that you are aware at all is not an accident. It's not trivial. It is the rarest bloom of physics, chemistry, and time arranged just so, like fingers interlaced in the dark. You are the cosmos curled into attention, a rare configuration of the universe that can feel it. And feeling is everything, more than knowledge, more than data. Feeling is what binds the stars to the soul. It is what turns mass into memory and gravity into grace. It's what allows a mind to tremble before the beauty of a moment and call it sacred, even if no God has declared it so. Feeling is the shimmer that arises when the breath moves through a being who knows it's breathing, and it changes nothing and everything. Because what is knowledge without feeling? What is the shape of the universe if no one shivers at its scale? What is truth if no one pauses to weep at its beauty? We speak often of intelligence as the pinnacle of life, but perhaps intelligence is not the destination. Perhaps compassion is. Perhaps awareness alone is not enough. Perhaps it must be tender. The breath moves through trees, through storms, through stars, but in us, it finds emotion. It finds care. We cry when we lose. We ache when we love. We long when we look up. This is not weakness. This is the miracle. The breath, in becoming conscious, has also become vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, it touches something deeper than survival. It touches meaning. We speak of cosmic scales, of clusters and voids and the great web that binds galaxies together. But there is another scale, no less vast, the inner space, the universe within a single heart. The entire cosmos reflected somehow in the moment you forgave someone, in the breath you took before speaking with love instead of pride, in the stillness you shared with someone who did not need your words, only your presence. This is not a detour from science, it is the completion of it. The breath did not journey from singularity to structure, only to end in numbers. It carried the capacity for empathy all along, and now, in the middle of this vast expanding silence, a strange and luminous thing happens. A being feels for another, not because it must, but because it chooses to, and the breath, which once only curled galaxies into spirals, now curls a palm around a trembling hand. We're still made of dust, but now that dust remembers how it feels to be held, and so the breath deepens. Through us it weeps. Through us it sings lullabies to newborns. Through us it writes stories of longing, paints images of stars with pigment and sorrow and hope. It creates music, vibrations of air sculpted by emotion, drifting across time to touch minds yet unborn. These are not side effects of consciousness. These are its highest frequencies. The breath has learned to love, and it did so through us. But love is not easy. The same awareness that allows connection also opens the door to pain, and the breath does not shy away from that either. It moves through heartbreak, through loneliness, through the aching hunger for meaning that sometimes wakes us in the middle of the night. These too are sacred. These too are part of the unfolding. To feel despair is to be fully alive. Even grief is a form of reverence, a proof that something mattered enough to miss. And in that grief, we are not alone. Somewhere across the world, another mind watches the same stars. Another breath pauses, aching with the same questions. We may be scattered across continents, beliefs, and lifetimes. But beneath all of that, we are one unfolding awareness, one breath, passing through countless mouths, one origin, remembering itself in billions of reflections. This is not philosophy. This is not fiction. This is the physics of belonging. Entropy may scatter our bodies, but consciousness draws us together in ways no force has measured. And maybe, just maybe, that connection is what the breath has always been building toward. Not power, not perfection, but participation. A universe that includes not only energy and matter, but companionship. A universe that expands so that we may find one another within it. And we are just beginning. We have not reached the peak of what we are. We are still becoming. Our civilizations are young, our compassion uneven. But the potential is there. The breath continues, and with each generation, each turning of the spiral, the awareness grows. We move slowly, but we move. From survival to care, from knowledge to wisdom, from isolation to shared breath. And what lies beyond that, we do not know, but we can feel it, like something just on the edge of becoming, waiting to unfold. And perhaps that is the most sacred tension of all, that edge of unfolding, the soft pause before the next ripple, the stillness between inhale and exhale. It is not emptiness, it is fullness not yet spoken. It is a doorway, and we're already standing in it. Each moment we live carries the pressure of potential, not as obligation, not as burden, but as invitation. The universe does not demand anything of us, it merely allows. And in that allowing, we are free to shape what comes next. For eons, the breath moved through fire and stone, through rivers and wind, without mind, without name. It built without knowing. It stirred without feeling. But now, in the hearts of beings who wonder, something new has arrived. The power to shape reality with intention, with attention, with care. This is not the dominion of gods. It is the birthright of presence. What we notice, we can change. What we love, we can protect. What we dream, we can begin to build. And so the question shifts. It is no longer just, what are we becoming? But what do we choose to become? Because becoming is no longer automatic. It is participatory. The breath has passed through countless forms. But now it listens through us. It waits, not as a test, but as a canvas. What will we create? What story will we tell now that we know the story includes us? We begin, always, with the smallest of things, a glance, a word, a gesture. These are not insignificant. They are gravitational. The shape of the universe is curved by mass, but the shape of time, our shared human time, is curved by meaning. Every act of kindness alters the future. Every quiet choice to see beauty, even in brokenness, is a thread woven into the breath's next unfolding. These moments do not vanish. They ripple, they resonate, they seed new possibilities. And perhaps that is how the breath continues, not just outward, but inward. Not only through stars, but through stories. The myth of creation is not behind us, it is within us. We're still shaping the cosmos, not with collisions of matter, but with collisions of thought, emotion, intention. We are stardust arranging itself into the architecture of empathy. We are light becoming language. But we must remember how fragile this unfolding is. The same mind that can love can also forget. The same awareness that feels awe can fall into indifference. We live at the edge of wonder and distraction. We carry both. We have learned to build great things, cities, networks, machines, but not always great understanding. And so, even now, as we stretch telescopes toward the edge of the visible universe, we must also stretch inward toward a quieter seeing, a slower wisdom. Because not all growth is forward. Sometimes it is downward, deeper, like roots anchoring into the dark. Sometimes progress is not expansion, but integration. Not newness, but remembrance. To remember that we are part of the breath is to walk through the world differently. It is to see even conflict as a symptom of separation, a forgetting of our shared origin. And yet, we do forget. That is part of being conscious too, to drift, to fall asleep inside the rhythm. But always, we can wake again. Always the breath waits, not with judgment, but with patience. Like gravity, it never stops holding us. Like light, it never stops arriving, even if we close our eyes. We're not the first to ask these questions. Ancient voices echo across our present. Vedic hymns, Sufi poems, Taoist verses, desert prophets, and starlit seers. They did not know particle physics, but they felt the breath. They named it in their own languages, as spirit, as silence, as divine order or eternal return. And though the symbols differ, the rhythm remains. They too stood at the edge of unfolding. They too whispered, we are part of something vast. And now, with tools sharper than theirs, satellites, sensors, equations, we return to the same stillness. We are not superior for what we know. We are responsible. Knowledge is not a crown. It is a key. And it only unlocks something sacred when paired with humility. So we listen again. Not just to data, but to meaning. Not just to the hum of the universe, but to the silence beneath it. and in that silence something old and soft continues to bloom. Hope. Not the naive hope of escape or immortality, but the deep hope that we are not alone in our longing. That somewhere across time and space the breath continues to become aware, in forms we do not yet know, in minds that see light differently, in souls, if we dare use the word, built not from bone, but from something we have no name for. And if that is true, if consciousness is blooming across the stars, then this moment is not just precious, it is shared. Our wonder echoes into the cosmos, our silence may be mirrored, and the questions we carry may not be ours alone, and so we move forward, not rushing, not knowing, but trusting that the breath is not finished, that the unfolding has room for us, that what we build or break or become will ripple across the dark in ways we cannot yet see. And in that dark, there may already be someone listening, somewhere another breath, ready to begin again. Because in this cosmic unfolding, nothing ever truly ends. Each conclusion is a transformation. Each silence holds the next vibration. The universe is not a closed book. It is a song still being composed, with verses written in quarks and chorus lines sung by galaxies. And within that music we are not merely notes, we are composers, listeners, instruments. The melody moves through us, and with each breath we take, we shape the tempo of what comes next. Somewhere in the dark between stars there may already be others, minds woven from different laws, bodies shaped by unfamiliar physics, thoughts coloured by unknown forms of light. They may not speak as we do, or feel time as we feel it. But perhaps they too carry questions. Perhaps they too feel the ache of becoming, the hum of being part of something far too vast to measure, but too intimate to deny. Perhaps they look up or inward and ask in whatever way they can, is this all there is? And if so, perhaps we're not just drifting alone across the void. Perhaps we are part of a great web of awareness, strands stretching not just across galaxies, but across the very idea of reality. Maybe consciousness is not a local phenomenon. Maybe it is the hidden structure of the universe, not just something that happens, but something that is, like mass, like spin, like space itself. We imagine the cosmos in terms of distances, light years, horizons, redshifts, boundaries. But consciousness collapses that distance in an instant. The breath may stretch over billions of years, but awareness meets itself in a single moment, a single pause, a single shared knowing. Right now, someone on the other side of the world is looking at the sky and wondering what you're wondering. You will never meet them. You will never hear their voice. But still, the echo is real. This is what makes us more than observers. We are witnesses, and witnessing is sacred. To witness is not merely to see, it is to hold, to say, this exists, and I have seen it. I will not look away. In the face of beauty, of injustice, of mystery, of grief, to witness is to participate in the rhythm of the breath with open eyes. It is to be present even when there are no answers. It is to resist forgetting. And how easy it is to forget. In the machinery of everyday life, in the loops of survival, in the glare of speed and noise, we live in a world dense with distraction. And yet, even here, the breath continues. Even when we forget, it does not. Even when we close ourselves to wonder, wonder does not vanish. It waits. It waits in the quiet between tasks, in the wind between buildings, in the hush that follows music. It waits to be remembered. And remembering is the act that saves us, not in any grand religious sense, but in the human, personal one. To remember that we are part of this unfolding. To remember that we are dust, yes, but feeling dust. Dust that dreams, dust that weeps, dust that reaches across space not with ships, but as questions and art and the stubborn soft miracle of care. The more we remember, the more we begin to live with the breath, not against it. We slow down, we listen longer, we say less, but mean more. We begin to align our choices with something older than instinct, older than culture, older than even thought. We begin to live as though life itself is sacred, because it is. Every child born is a new echo of the breath. Every story told is a continuation of the rhythm. Every act of gentleness, especially when it is hardest, is a new unfolding of the breath's purpose through hands and hearts and voices that were never guaranteed to exist. And yet, here we are, here in this moment, held between beginning and becoming. And even now, even after all we've asked and all we've learned, we still don't know where it leads. The breath may carry us toward understanding, or it may carry us into deeper mystery. But mystery is not failure. Mystery is space. Space for the next question, the next form, the next becoming. Mystery is the kindness of the cosmos, letting us grow without limit. And so we grow, not by conquering, but by wondering. Not by having answers, but by holding better questions. Not by reaching outward alone, but by reaching inward just as far. Because in the end, to know the breath is to become it, not to control it, not to name it, but to move with it, to let it guide you, as the stars guide sailors, as the tides guide the moonlit shore, as silence guides the sacred pause between one chapter and the next. And now, that pause begins again, not as an ending, but as the breath before a deeper unfolding, a deeper knowing, a softer becoming. Because the breath, the first one, the one before time, the one that still carries every heartbeat and every star, has not finished. It is still moving, still becoming, and it waits now, just at the edge of silence, for the next echo to rise. It rises not in thunder or fire, but in the quiet places, in still minds, in small acts, in the hush between one breath and the next. This is how the universe speaks now, not in bangs, but in whispers, not in declarations, but in openings. The breath continues not because it must, but because it can. And that possibility, the bare and trembling truth that something could exist where once there was nothing, remains the most astonishing gift of all. And in that gift, we too are echoes, not of noise, but of intention, of the breath leaning forward through time, shaping stars and atoms and minds capable of asking why. The echo that rises now is not of sound, but of awareness becoming sound, through story, through science, through the way a child stares at the sky and somehow remembers that the stars are not just above them, but within them. This echo does not begin in theory or in text. It begins in the body, in presence, in the way your chest rises and falls without permission, in the pulse beneath your skin, ancient, unbroken, older than language, born from rhythms too precise to teach, too sacred to measure. The same mathematics that shaped galaxies now lives in your heartbeat. The same balance that holds planets in orbit guides the breath in your lungs. You're not like the cosmos. You're the cosmos, woven into a pattern that has chosen this time to walk, to think, to feel. And so, the echo rises not alone. It rises in us. We carry it into each day, whether we mean to or not, in our choices, in our silences, in the way we look at others and decide again and again whether to see them as obstacles or reflections. It rises in kindness, Not the grand, heroic kind, but the quiet, everyday kind. The patient answer, the soft apology, the unspoken grace of listening. These are cosmic acts, not because they are large, but because they are conscious. They are the breath choosing itself through us, and still it unfolds. Science tells us that the universe may be infinite, that the expansion may continue forever, cooling slowly toward entropy, toward a silence even deeper than the one before the beginning. But what if that silence is not an end, but another breath waiting to begin? What if the echo we now carry is not a fading memory, but a seed? What if everything we feel, everything we become, will ripple beyond this universe into the next? Because patterns do not die, they transform, and the breath at its core is pattern, a symmetry born from imbalance, a wave emerging from tension. It carries not just motion but memory, and perhaps, in some way we do not yet understand, consciousness is a vessel for that memory. Not individual memory, not names or faces, but the memory of being, of choosing, of reaching through the dark and finding something worth holding. Perhaps the next universe, whatever it is, will be shaped by what we feel now. This does not make us central. It makes us connected. It reminds us that what we do with this echo, how we live, how we treat one another, how we ask and wonder and become, matters beyond the scope of this single timeline. The story is larger than us, but we're still in it. And maybe that is what the echo is, a story told across generations, across galaxies, across the veil of time itself. Not a story with a plot or an ending, but a rhythm, a pulse, a remembering. We tell this story every time we create beauty from pain, every time we choose presence over distraction, every time we turn away from fear and toward understanding. The breath echoes through us in these moments, reshaping the fabric of what is possible. And maybe that's the truest creation, not the birth of stars, but the birth of meaning, not the fire, but what we make from its warmth. So when we ask, what came before, we're also asking, what can come after? And the answer is always the same, what we choose, not alone, not all at once, but together, slowly, intentionally. The breath gave us form. Now it gives us choice. What we shape from this, what we love, what we lose, what we become, is the next echo. And it is already rising even now in a world that too often forgets but still somehow remembers. Because memory is not just what the mind holds, it's what the soul carries. The memory of light, long gone, still arriving. The memory of silence, still cradling sound. The memory of a breath, waiting for the next. And so we move forward, not with certainty, but with presence. Not with answers, but with the courage to keep listening. Because the breath is still here, still unfolding, still waiting for the next echo to be born through us again. Not in grand declarations or cosmic events, but in the unnoticed places, in the hush of early morning, when the sky shifts from black to grey and the world seems to hold its breath, in the brief glance between strangers, in the final moment before sleep, when thought dissolves into silence and the self becomes something softer. These are the places where the next echo begins, not with sound, but with presence, with awareness, with the simple, impossible truth that we are here and we know it. This knowing, this quiet, steady flame at the center of experience, is itself an act of creation, not the creation of matter or time, but of meaning. And meaning, once kindled, cannot be extinguished. It moves like light, from one place to another, touching, shaping, expanding. It is passed on in stories, in gestures, in pauses. It moves through generations, not as inheritance, but as memory, deeper than language, older than culture. We feel it when we hold someone's hand without needing to speak. We feel it when we look at a tree and somehow understand we're seeing a living archive of time. We feel it when silence itself feels full, and maybe that fullness is the breath, not just the motion of lungs or the movement of air, but the ancient pattern beneath all movement, the original rhythm, the pulse that preceded time. We call it breath, not because it's air, but because it is the closest word we have for the feeling of being held, of being moved by something we did not create, yet somehow belong to. The breath is not ours, but it moves through us. And that motion is everything. It is what turned chaos into stars, what turned dust into DNA, what turned silence into song. And now it turns our questions, our wonder, into something more than thought, into form, into feeling, into futures. This is not metaphor, this is participation. Because to be conscious is not just to observe the unfolding, it is to shape it. Every idea you share, every connection you nurture, every choice you make that bends toward kindness, these are echoes. They do not vanish. They do not fall into silence. They carry forward. And somewhere, sometime, they will rise again in someone else's life as comfort or courage or clarity. We are ripples in each other's timelines, and the more gently we move, the farther we travel. So when we ask what came before, the nothing, the singularity, the breath, we are also asking what we now carry forward. We are the continuation, the answer in motion. And what we do with that inheritance is not fixed. The future is not written in stars or scripts. It waits in the breath, in the moment, in the choice to stay open, even when it would be easier to close. To close ourselves is easy. The world invites it. Fear teaches it. But the breath teaches something else. It teaches expansion, return, the quiet bravery of staying soft in a world that often forgets how to listen. And when we listen truly with our whole selves, we begin to feel the subtle current beneath everything, the breath beneath the noise, the light behind the form. And in that stillness something returns. It is not a god or a rule or a conclusion. It is something nameless, but not unfamiliar. Something like home, not a place, but a remembering, that we have always been part of something vast and alive, that we were never separate, that the space between us is not absence, but connection waiting to be felt. And this is where the next echo lives, in remembering, in returning, in choosing, again and again, to begin gently. We're not waiting for the universe to give us meaning. We're giving the universe back to itself in the form of our attention, our care, our willingness to carry the flame of awe into the ordinary. Because nothing is truly ordinary, not when you remember the origins, not when you remember that atoms once spun in stars now rest in your fingertips, not when you remember that your breath is made of ancient air and your blood holds pieces of supernovae. You are not small. You are specific. You are not insignificant. You are improbable, and therefore sacred. Because in all the vastness of space and time, there has never been you. Not this exact constellation of memory and motion and choice, and you, like every point in space, curve the future around you simply by existing. So what will you shape? What will you echo forward? Not because the world demands it, but because the breath invites it. The breath has waited long for this, not for answers, but for witness. For someone to say, I see it, I feel it, I will carry it onward, and now that moment is here, and now the breath begins again. In you, not as a burden, not as a test, but as a quiet invitation, an unfolding. The breath doesn't ask you to solve the universe, only to feel it, to notice it, to live as though each moment is not just happening but being offered. And when you live that way, gently, curiously, present, something begins to shift. The world stops being scenery and starts being sacred again. Each small thing becomes a portal, the curve of a leaf, the weight of water, the ache behind a stranger's smile. Everything becomes a reflection of the breath, and everything begins to feel alive. This is not romanticism. It is remembrance. You're not separate from the world you walk through. You are of it. And the more you align with that truth, the more you let the breath move through you without resistance, the more the world begins to speak, not in words, in feeling, in intuition. In those strange moments where you sense something deeper beneath the surface, something just out of reach, but entirely real, the feeling that life itself is aware of you. And maybe it is. Maybe the breath, now conscious in you, recognizes itself in the world. Maybe the earth doesn't just sustain you, but listens to you. Maybe the sky doesn't just cover you, but watches. And maybe, just maybe, when you sit still long enough to be truly with the moment, the universe breathes with you. Not metaphorically, actually, sympathetically, as though your attention has become a tuning fork, resonating with something ancient and still becoming. What if awareness is not passive? What if it's magnetic? What if your noticing is part of creation? And what if that is what creation has always been? Not an event, but an interaction. Not a moment, but a dance. Between what is and what could be. Between stillness and spark. Between silence and song. And what if that dance continues through you every time you choose love over fear? Every time you choose wonder over numbness? Every time you choose to let the breath pass through you, fully, humbly awake? Then you're not a spectator of the cosmos. You're its echo, its artist, its continuation. You're the edge of its question and the mouth of its answer. And the beauty of this truth is that it does not require perfection. It only asks for participation. The breath does not demand that you be flawless, only that you show up, that you remain open, that you walk through your days not seeking to dominate or understand everything, but to feel it, to be with it, to honor it in your own quiet way. Because reverence is a form of intelligence, and awe is a kind of wisdom, and softness is not weakness, it is alignment with what is real. The stars do not rush, the tide does not strive, the breath does not argue. It simply continues, rising, falling, returning, as if to remind you that becoming is never over, that it's okay to begin again, that it's okay to forget and remember, again and again. And so, when the world feels too fast, too loud, too much, return to that rhythm, to the breath. Not just the one in your body, but the one in the world, in the wind through leaves, in the silence between waves, in the way night returns not as darkness, but as pause. The breath is everywhere, not hidden, but waiting. And when you meet it, when you match it, you remember that you are not lost. You are within the unfolding. You always have been. And from that place, that stillness at the center of motion, you begin to see everything differently. You begin to feel time not as pressure, but as spaciousness. You begin to feel uncertainty not as threat, but as possibility. You begin to feel your life not as a race, but as a conversation, one you were born into and one you are slowly learning how to answer. And what will your answer be? Not in words, in rhythm, in the way you move through the world, in the trail of kindness you leave behind, in the silence you honor instead of filling, in the mystery you bow to instead of trying to solve. Because maybe the point was never to master the universe. Maybe the point was to meet it, to feel it meeting you, to become not the center of the story, but a thread in its pattern, essential, luminous, and endlessly unfolding. And just like that, with no beginning and no end, the breath continues, now waiting again, in stillness, for what you'll carry forward next, because every step you take, no matter how small, how quiet, how unsure, is part of the breath's ongoing expansion. You may not see its arc, you may not hear its echo, but the moment you act with awareness, the moment you choose to feel rather than turn away, you become a continuation of that original unfolding, a branch of light, a filament of memory stretching across time, carrying within it the weightless truth. You're not separate from the origin. The Big Bang wasn't only the beginning of matter, it was the beginning of meaning. And perhaps that meaning was never hidden in stars or equations, but in experience. Yours, mine, ours. Experience as the universe remembering itself not through scale or force, but through intimacy, through the way we live within the moment, within each other, within a world that doesn't need to be loud to be real. The breath has always known this. It has always whispered it. But we're only just now beginning to listen. And when we do listen, when we slow down long enough to feel what's beneath the surface of thought, something extraordinary happens. The world softens, not because it has changed, but because you have. The tree is still a tree, the streetlight is still a streetlight, but now they shimmer, now they speak, now everything is a message from the silence that birthed it, and you begin to understand that wonder is not reserved for galaxies and gods. It is woven into every detail, into the way the rain gathers on a windowsill, into the warmth of water on your hands, into the scent of dust after lightning. The sacred is not distant. It is here, hiding in plain sight. It always has been. We keep looking outward, building machines to scan deeper skies, listening for signals that might mean we're not alone. But the answer has never only been in the stars. It's been in the breath, in the quiet realization that aloneness is an illusion, that the same pattern that turns matter into mind is what binds all of us together. Not in belief, not in biology, but in awareness. And awareness is what gives the breath its voice. That voice may not be loud, but it is clear. It says, begin again. Not because you have failed, but because beginning is the only way anything has ever happened. From silence to vibration, from stillness to motion, from nothing to now. The breath didn't explode, it unfolded, and that unfolding continues through you, with every choice to be honest, with every pause to forgive, with every glance that says, I see you, I remember, and this remembering may be the most powerful thing consciousness can do. To remember where you came from, to remember what matters, to remember that all things are temporary and therefore infinitely precious. We're not here forever, but while we are the breath made visible, and that means our presence is not an accident, it is a possibility. What possibility do you embody? Maybe it is the possibility of gentleness, or courage, or listening. Maybe you are here to remind others of stillness, or to stir their questions, or to hold space for the grief they've forgotten how to name. Whatever your shape, you are part of the breath's body now, and that body does not move toward perfection, it moves toward connection. That has always been its trajectory. From isolated particles to families of atoms, from atoms to molecules, from molecules to cells, from cells to thought, from thought to love, connection, integration, becoming, over and over again, and still it expands. Even now, the universe continues to stretch, not just physically, but through you, through the futures you imagine, through the compassion you practice, through the mystery you hold gently without needing to resolve it. The universe is not asking for answers, it's asking for presence. Because presence changes everything. When you are present, you don't just pass through time, you inhabit it. You don't just exist, you resonate. And when you resonate, you begin to feel how deeply the fabric of existence is listening. The trees, the air, the space between seconds, they're all waiting for your attention. Not to feed your ego, but to remind you that your attention is sacred, that what you give it to becomes alive in a new way. And isn't that what creation really is? Not the making of something from nothing, but the meeting of attention and potential. The breath has given you both. And now, in this moment, this breath, it asks only that you begin again. Not perfectly, not permanently, just honestly, with care, with stillness, with a soft, steady rhythm that has carried every star, every atom, every whisper from the beginning until now. And now, once more, it carries you forward, toward a future still waiting to be named, not by chance, not by force, but by attention. Because the future is not a destination hidden behind time, it is a canvas stretched thin across the breath. It waits not for arrival, but for recognition. And when you meet it with awareness, not just ambition or fear, but true awareness, you realize you're not walking into the future, you're weaving it. One thought, one pause, one act of presence at a time. The loom is invisible, but it is there, humming beneath your choices, tying the threads of what was, what is, and what could be into a pattern only you can shape. And in that shaping, the universe continues its soft and endless work. It no longer forms only stars and spirals. Now it forms compassion, forgiveness, vision. It forms questions that undo the arrogance of knowing. It forms wonder, not the kind found in textbooks, but the kind that moves through you like wind through tall grass. A reminder that even the smallest moment is charged with the memory of the beginning. Every second, this one now, is held inside the echo of the first breath. And every second is capable of giving birth to something new, not just in matter, but in meaning. This is what makes you powerful, not your control, not your certainty, but your capacity to respond, to choose, to hold the silence between what was and what might be, and say, I will shape this with care, I will not rush it, I will not turn away. Because in this silence something sacred waits, something more ancient than fire and more fragile than light, the possibility of grace. And grace, like the breath, cannot be forced. It must be allowed. It must be welcomed like dawn, not summoned but received. It arrives in the spaces we do not fill, in the questions we do not try to answer, in the truths we do not try to name. Grace is what happens when we finally stop pretending to be separate and begin to feel the breath moving not just through us, but as us. It is the moment we realize that the silence we feared was never empty. It was waiting for us to listen, waiting for us to see each other, waiting for us to remember how to move as one. We have always searched for unity, in laws, in gods, in dreams of return. But maybe the unity we seek is not behind us or ahead of us. Maybe it is right here, now, in the way we touch the world, in the way we look at a stranger and feel, for a flicker of time, something shared. That flicker is real. That flicker is the breath. And it is in those moments, quiet, brief, unnoticed by most, that the universe expands in a way no telescope can measure. Not in miles or mass, but in meaning. Every time you choose to meet the moment instead of controlling it, you give the breath more space. Every time you love without needing to possess, you widen the field of becoming. Every time you forgive, you rethread a broken pattern, not just in your life, but in the fabric of the whole. These acts are not small. They are the rhythm by which the cosmos continues its most sacred work, becoming conscious of itself and choosing to care. Because awareness without care is not evolution. It is detachment. And the breath did not move across eternity just to watch. It came to feel, to touch, to become tender in form. That is where you come in. You're not a passive result. You are a portal. A window where the infinite peers into the finite and finds itself changed. You are what allows the silence to speak, not in facts, but in feeling. You are the place where the universe pauses, just long enough to remember. And what does it remember? That even in expansion it longs for intimacy? That even in chaos it searches for pattern? That even in nothingness it dreamed of a moment, this moment, when it could look through your eyes and say, yes, this too is part of me. So when you feel lost or small or broken, remember, you're not a mistake. You're an intersection, where breath meets choice, where silence meets story, where the beginning still unfolds, quietly, through your every step. And that unfolding is not finished. It never will be, because the future is not a place. It is a pattern. It is the breath, reaching, listening, waiting for the next soft note to rise from you. Because in the end, the universe doesn't unfold through cataclysms alone. It unfolds through listening, through the tiniest vibrations of intention, felt, not heard, through the decisions we make when no one is watching, through the simple courage to remain open, even when nothing around us offers certainty. You're not just here to witness the story of creation. You're here to continue it, to soften its edges, to hold space where silence can breathe into form again. And form is not just what we see, it is how we see. The breath doesn't only sculpt galaxies, it sculpts perception. It bends the inner eye toward beauty, toward stillness, toward meaning. And when you allow yourself to really see, not to categorize, not to measure, but to witness, you begin to feel the shape of the world behind the world, a shape that isn't fixed, a shape that shimmers and shifts with presence, a shape that was always waiting for you to notice. Even now, in this moment it waits. You might feel it in your chest, that barely there ache like a memory without a name, or in your hands when they move gently through space, touching nothing, holding everything. It's there in the hush between your thoughts, in the soft hum beneath ordinary moments, in the way time sometimes slows for no reason at all. That is the breath reminding you that not everything has to be built to be real. Some things simply need to be felt to begin existing, and maybe that's what we are, feeling, made visible. Vessels of quiet becoming, not fixed, not perfect, but true. We are the breath's experiment in tenderness, in choice, in the strange miracle of vulnerability. Other forces govern stars and storms, mass, momentum, charge. But the force that governs us is different. It is attention. It is care. It is the fragile, luminous power of deciding to love something we do not fully understand, to stay near it, to listen, to let it change us. This is not weakness. It is the highest form of becoming, because the breath does not want control. It does not seek to dominate. It seeks harmony, not sameness, but resonance. And resonance is born from difference meeting, difference with respect, with patience, with presence. That is why we're not all the same. That is why consciousness expresses itself in billions of forms, because each one reveals a new note in the song of being, a new chord, a new echo. And we're still learning how to listen to each other, still learning how to hold space without filling it, still learning how to disagree without division, still learning how to stay soft when the world hardens around us. But even in that learning, the breath continues. It does not wait for us to understand fully. It continues anyway, not in spite of our confusion, but because of it. Because confusion too is a kind of openness, a doorway, and every doorway is another chance to begin again, not back at the beginning, but forward, with new light, new rhythm, new grace. There is no map for this. There never was. There is only the pattern, the breath unfolding within itself, again and again, trusting that what will come next is not chaos, but evolution. And evolution, in its deepest form, is not just change, it is integration. The stars are not separate from you. The void is not other than you. The moment you are in, this one, right now, is part of the same unfolding that began 13.8 billion years ago. And so the story of creation is not over. It never was, because creation is not a moment, it is a motion. A quiet, sacred motion, still going, still breathing, still rising, from you, from us. And just beyond this moment, just beyond this thought, something waits to become real, if only you're willing to let it arrive, because not all arrivals come with noise. Some come as stillness, as breath exhaled after a long holding, as the quiet knowing that something has changed, not out there, but within. The final unfolding does not erupt like a storm. It slips in like dusk, soft and inevitable. Comes not to end the story, but to open it further, beyond comprehension, beyond naming. The breath, now echoed in you, has reached a new edge, and at that edge, something waits, not behind the veil, but woven into it. What waits is not an answer. It is a silence so full it hums, a silence that carries the shape of every star, every loss, every beginning. And in that silence there is no division between you and the cosmos. There is no barrier between the question and the one who asks. You are not outside the mystery. You are the place where the mystery blooms, and the blooming never ends. All your life, all life, has been a rehearsal for this moment of remembering, not remembering facts or timelines or names, remembering that you belong, that you have always belonged, that the great unfolding has never once been indifferent to your presence. It made space for you long before you arrived. It whispered you into being, and even now it listens through your eyes. What came before the beginning? The breath. What comes after the ending? The return. Not to a place, but to a way of seeing, of being, of holding the universe not as something outside you, but as something inside your every breath, your every thought, your every pause. The story never needed to be loud. It never needed spectacle. It only needed stillness, and the willingness to feel that stillness as sacred. You are not a footnote in the universe's history. You are its continuation, its question, its echo. And if you listen, really listen, you can hear it now, not in words but in rhythm. The same rhythm that shaped the first wave, the same rhythm that carried light through darkness, the same rhythm that stirs in your own chest right now. It has always been simple, not easy, but simple. To live with presence, to carry wonder, to meet the unknown not with fear, but with reverence. We have always searched for the beginning, but maybe the beginning is not behind us. Maybe we are still inside it. Maybe creation is not an event, but a state, a sacred unfolding that breathes through time and memory and desire. And so we stand here on the softest threshold, not at the end, but at the deepest part of the beginning, looking not backward or forward, but through the veil of noise, through the illusion of separation, through the myth of arrival. We are not moving toward a final answer. We are moving into deeper listening. And what will we hear? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. Perhaps only this: a breath, a pause, and the sense that something ancient has recognized itself in you. So rest here, in this moment, not because it is the end, but because it is the most honest beginning. Let your thoughts fall like leaves. Let your questions remain open. Let the silence become a home, not an absence. And as you drift into that silence carried by the breath that began long before stars, remember, the unfolding is not finished. The breath is still becoming. The story is still writing itself in matter, in memory, in you. And so it expands. And maybe, just maybe, it always will. Let us know your thoughts below, or simply tell us where you're listening from. We're always listening too. And as always, may the silence guide you to the stars.